بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Assalamu alaikum everyone, and assalamu alaikum to our panelists and our special guest, esteemed brother and friend Zakir Husain. Welcome to our special show today. Inshallah, it might go into a second show as well in terms of what we are dealing with, this very important debate. So today we gather here today with our esteemed guest who debated very recently with Dr. Brown on a very important topic, and that's why we are here to talk about it. Why is it important? What relevance it has in Christian-Muslim relationship in terms of apologetics and our particular religion and interaction between these two. So without going into the details first of all, I would like to ask our guest and our panel members, how are you, first of all, and how is Ramadan going?
Alhamdulillah, your sound is slightly off, Akhi. So
Is it any better?
Yeah,
there we
come
go.
Closer to the microphone, I think.
Yeah, come closer to the microphone.
That's what it is.
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum. How's everyone?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yeah, very well.
That was a wonderful introduction. Yeah, so Brother Zakir, assalamu alaikum. We haven't spoken before, but just for the audience, we so there are some people that think we all live next door to each other. I actually got a call the other day from somebody saying, "Hey, I want to give somebody a gift. Can you drop it off for them?" I said, "Yeah, I could, but the guy lives 4 hours away from me." so we don't all live next to each other, and we don't just all sort of know each other. Alhamdulillah. So, Brother Zakir, assalamu alaikum. Great to meet you for the first time.
Wa alaikum assalam. Great to meet you as well, brother.
Alhamdulillah. And I'm really looking forward to the actual video itself coming out very shortly. Today's session, as Brother Mansur said, is we'll be focusing on really the topic, the discussion, and what happened. And Brother Hashim, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Alhamdulillah, we are in Ramadan. Today is already the 3rd.
Subhanallah. Yes, no, exactly. It goes so quickly.
Passes by so quickly. You know?
Almost Thursday, Friday, Sunday. Going so quickly.
Alhamdulillah. So, yeah, I mean, Ramadan Mubarak to everyone. And do keep us in your du'as in this blessed month. And we hope your fasting, your prayers, your tilawat of the Quran, everything is going well. And yeah, I mean, we are here for another live stream. So this is a special live stream that is a review of the debate on is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Bible, which took place, was it last week?
Monday.
Yeah, Monday. So it's kind of a pre-review review, if you want to call it that, because the actual video for it hasn't been released by MDI yet. They are doing some last-minute editing. So inshallah, it should be out shortly. I think Brother Zakir will inshallah inform us more in detail with regards to this. So we just wanted to understand from Brother Zakir's point of view with regards to the background preparations, how long it has taken, what has transpired in the years that he has been preparing for this debate and calling Dr. Brown for the debate. In fact, inshallah, it'll be informal. Nothing major will be discussed in this. We are hoping once the video is released, we'll be having a much more detailed review on a point by point basis, inshallah. So.
And should we open up for a Q&A today, do you think, later on?
Yeah, we should be able to get a few Q&A questions here.
Inshallah. So we'll be sharing the link very shortly. Brother Mansur wants to come in.
Yeah, I was going to say we need to understand the importance of that debate that's taking place, because this is just a preamble of a book that is going to be released, inshallah, which is in the making, almost done. And this will be a game changer. I mean, we are working on now inter-Muslim Christian debates in which the level, the amount, the breadth of discussion points is no longer like the model that people used to be familiar with in the past. Now we're dealing with academic contentions, we're going into scholarship, and we are reviewing the scholarship and dealing with the scholarship directly in a view to engage in a more meaningful and fruitful way, so that people don't accuse us of strawmanning or not understanding and comprehending. And unfortunately, I mean, I have to say, I was in the debate, and I was a bit disappointed with Zakir's interlocutor in terms of how he undermined the actual engagement and what we are dealing with in terms of the argumentation that's been presented. It is not simply just saying like, there's no mention of Prophet Muhammad in the debate. You should be open to understand your opponent's arguments and what he's bringing. Is it something new? Is it something that it's not been encountered before? And what Zakir has done, I'm sure, as we will be dealing with the points later on, as the footage is revealed and we go through point by point, where this is not something that you may have heard before. This is not something that you may have experienced in terms of the prophecies of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that has been encountered in the World Wide Web or books and videos and so on. These are latest research going deep down in their own sources and trying to understand where the references are mentioned and why they were so obscure. Because, one of the things people often ask, I mean, why do we have to dig inside the scriptures of the Judeo-Christian text? And this is what we might highlight today. And interestingly, this is very, very precise reason why Zakir started his opening statement with the methodology used by the New Testament scribes or the authors of the gospel. That was misunderstood by, Dr. Brown himself, and he thought this was an attack. So these are the crucial points, inshallah, we will learn, as well as the background. So before we go into all these nuances and details which are important to understand, who is Dr. Brown, Zakir Bhai? Who is Dr. Brown? How many of us knew about him until we heard about the debates and debate challenges and so on? Is he someone who's important for us to understand and say, okay, maybe he is an important figure within the Judeo-Christian apologetics, that people should look at his work and what he's coming up with in terms of his contribution? Or is it just another guy on the internet or elsewhere that doing debates or lectures and so on? Is it something that Muslims should be aware of, or you think only on the context of this topic, for example? Go ahead.
Well, my experience with Dr. Brown, I basically came across him about 11 years ago. How I came across him was after my debate with David Wood. I was checking out the comments because a lot of the Christians were claiming that Zakir Husain was using anti-Christian Jewish polemics. So basically they were saying I was taking the arguments that rabbis use against Judaism and I used it against David Wood. So then what they started writing in the comments is, we think, because they were disappointed in how David Wood had responded to many of my arguments, there were Christians recommending to him on his own website that David should read Dr. Brown's books, his 5-volume works responding to the rabbis. And this constantly, I kept coming across Dr. Brown this, Dr. Brown that, coming from these Christians over the years. So I started checking YouTube videos out to find out who is this Dr. Brown. And then I started coming across videos of him debating with rabbis. And then I realized that a lot of these arguments that the Christians appeal to, especially when it comes to the prophecies of the Prophet, peace be upon him, they're getting a lot of their material from Dr. Brown's books, because a lot of these prophecies that we be claiming are about the Prophet, the Christians claim they're about Jesus. So when we respond to them or give an objection, they're getting most of their defense from Dr. Brown's books, because rabbis, like for example, in my opening statement, I mentioned how the Matthew's gospel, for example, seems to twist text from the Old Testament. Well, rabbis have been using these very same arguments. So Christians have been appealing to Dr. Brown and his books to respond to these allegations. And although Dr. Brown isn't very well known in Muslim circles, he is very, very famous, especially in missionary circles and in America. He's got his own radio show. He's released multiple books, 5 volumes, just answering Jewish objections to Jesus. He's been involved in critical commentaries, like on the book of Jeremiah. And he is somebody that most of the apologists that even us Muslims deal with, they appeal to him and they look up to him. And if you read a lot of their articles, you'll realize they're quoting arguments from Dr. Brown. So that was the background of why I started getting interested in Dr. Brown's materials and apologetics.
All right. So he seems to be a source for Christian missionaries and apologists to go to look up to him and his works as a reference point for answering counter Jewish missionary arguments or Messianic Jews arguments, for example. So in terms of the credentials, I heard in the debate that he has 3 years of classical Arabic. So he must have studied Arabic. I mean, this is one of the things that intrigues me. People who study Arabic and understand Arabic language, and yet they don't see the clear and direct evidence from the Quran itself. I mean, just like the hundreds and thousands of Christian Arabs, for example, who it is their native tongue, or there may be even someone who studied the Arabic language to a level in which they appreciate the Quranic Arabic, because that's the Arabic standard for eloquence, if you want to call it, because the Quran is the highest eloquent you can have within its linguistic stylistics. So they read the Quran and they don't appreciate the message and the evidence that comes with the message. So Dr. Brown seems to be one of those individuals who have somehow being averted in benefiting from the Quran. I mean, Quran itself alludes to a point where the Quran can guide, of course, those who are sincere, and it can also misguide those people who are not willing to be guided. So I'm not questioning Dr. What's his name? Michael Brown, is it full name?
Yeah,
Dr. Michael
Brown.
Approach there, but this should be a point for everyone who's studying Arabic to understand the Quranic language, to have this intention that, are you approaching the Quran to understand what it says, or are you approaching with a negative approach in which you want to refute and you want to dismantle, you want to rebut what the Quran says? The Quran is not going to benefit you, because the Quran can misguide you because of your intentions, even though the message is clear. I mean, it is quite important, just like how people see the message in the cigarette pack. Smoking causes cancer, smoking causes lung problems, and so on and so forth. They see the message, but it doesn't impact them. There are something there that will prevent them from people, because of their particular affiliation, their particular baggage, their particular approach. They would not be benefiting from that message from the cigarette pack, even the message is very clear, pristine, without any ambiguity. It very clearly shows even the picture of a very bad lung, and still people smoke, right? So the Quran, even though so clear and clear with its evidence, people may not benefit from it because there's something that needs changing within oneself, their intentions, their heart, their purity of thought and approach, and so on. So Dr. Brown seems to be a source for many of the people. In fact, in the debate, the people who were attending, I'm sure he must have been a source for them as well. Most of them were Christians. How many Muslims were there in the debate that you noticed, Zakir Bhai?
Probably a trinity.
SubhanAllah.
There were probably about 4, 5, 6, maybe to the max.
Yeah, less than 2% maybe.
Yeah, and the rest of the whole audience was made up by the Christian audience, and many of them that visits frequently Speaker's Corner. I just want to share quickly, if you don't mind, before we go into some questions I want to ask you, Brother Zakir Bhai. When I was in the debate, I was looking at the audience, every now and then, just to understand. Of course, I didn't want to keep on looking because they might feel like, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to just understand and assess and so on? Let there be natural flow in terms of how they're approaching. But even when you see the footage coming later on, you'll realize they are sitting there waiting and looking at you with this surprise, what awaits, what will await them, what will come, because they're not there relaxed like, what's Zakir going to bring? We've heard it all. It wasn't like this. It wasn't a site in which people were content already, people were confident already, people were relaxed to the point that they know that there is no argument or evidence from Zakir or for the Muslims about Muhammad being mentioned in the Bible. They were all just like a discovery of a New Testament or an Old Testament or any of the biblical manuscripts. When they hear there is a particular manuscript uncovered, you know how the reaction is like. How damaging is it going to be? Is it going to contradict what is already there? Is it going to be something new? This is some kind of expectation. So this I saw within them, and I would like people, when they see the video footage, just observe as the camera is moving around. Look at them. Why is it that this kind of, not great confidence, that there is no mention, like what we would hear later on, Dr. Brown would say, categorical no, not even possibility of him being mentioned in the Bible. And yet we have the Christian audience with this suspense. What if there's something there that we haven't heard that we need to counter?
Yeah, I was going to say, brother, this sounds a lot like, that feeling that when a kid's done something wrong and they're guilty, and they've sort of hidden whatever they've done away, and then they're afraid they're going to get found out. And it's that sort of that anxiety and fear that I'm going to get called out any moment now. And you're sitting around the dinner table, everybody's eating the dinner, and he's sitting there in the corner, slowly eating his food, knowing somebody's going to call him out. That's what it sounds like. And that's how I sort of feel when I speak to these people. It's like you bring up a point and they immediately go into panic mode. So I want to ask Brother Zakir a question, actually, which was, we've established Dr. Brown is clearly a well-known academic. He's clearly respected, very respected amongst the Christian circles. But he labels himself on his own website, on Brown Ministries, I think, or something I was reading. He calls himself a Jewish believer in Jesus. Now, how is this particular belief that he has different to Christianity? Is he a Trinitarian? Is he not a Trinitarian? Is he a Jew? Is he not a Jew? Where does he fit in the spectrum of beliefs?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why the Christians hold up Dr. Brown as a trophy, because he's a Jew who came from an Orthodox background and became a full-on Christian. But the thing is, even when I was studying his books in preparation, I noticed that at times he is a full-on Trinitarian, he's a full-on Christian, but for some reason it seems at times that he's got both legs planted on two different boats, because at times, even when he's defending the Trinity in like one volume, he's got on theological objections to the New Testament, and he's defending the Trinity. But some of the ways he goes around it, you can see that to me, it felt like he's pandering to the Jewish audience to the point where certain statements or the way he's trying to phrase the defense of the Trinity, other Christians would take issue with it. And sometimes there even be slip-ups where he's explaining the Trinity, where it seems like he only believes the Father alone is God. Like there's one part of his book where he gives the example of, off the top of my head, Jesus being like the receptionist or the secretary to the boss. So the Father is the boss and Jesus is like the secretary. And
so this is like a subordination view. Like
definitely.
A subordination view, yeah.
Yet it's supposed to be a co-equal triune God. Right. So at times there does seem to be some tensions where it seems like him within himself, whether he's trying to make the Christian Trinity and the theology of Christianity seem more Jewish. Like he won't say Jesus, he'll say Yeshua, because he's trying to get to a Jewish audience. But at times it seems like he's pandering too much, where it's going out of what you would call Orthodox Christianity. And that's what I noticed. And these are some of the things I will bring up if we debate on a topic that was agreed: is Jesus God?
Right.
So in short, what would you say is the difference between someone like Dr. Brown, who I believe is a Messianic Jew, and just say an average Christian? What's the difference?
The difference is in the way he presents the same things. So everything a normal Christian would tell you, he tries to present it in a more, to me, sugar-coated way that would make it sound more Jewish. Like, for example, he will say something like, a Christian will say God became man. That's what most say. He incarnated. He will try to use the language of the Old Testament, that the way God filled the temple, that's how God filled Jesus. But then we know from other New Testament texts that God fills other Christian believers, and God filling the temple doesn't make the temple God. So why would God filling Jesus make Jesus God? So when I understand what he's trying to do, but sometimes when he tries to pander to the Jews in this way, it doesn't fit what they actually believe. So in my opinion, he's the same as the normal Christians, but he just tries to make everything seem more Jewish. So he'll phrase things in a way that I think a lot of normal Christians would take issue with.
So, I mean, this to me sounds like some kind of theological gap filling exercise that he's trying to do. So, I mean, clearly there is a very distinct Talmudic Jewish theology that completely denies, much like Islam, any kind of incarnation and any kind of creation view of God, which Trinitarians hold. But then this pandering to it, as you say, what do you think is his motivation? I mean, is he trying to bring communities together? Or is he doing it for, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you've read the books. What do you get from reading his books that he's actually attempting to do here? Because if they are so contradictory, how can you even consider bringing them together? So what's his motivation? Why do you think he's doing it then? And why all this work?
I cannot speak about what is in his heart or in his mind, but
Sure.
from what I've read about him and what I've heard Jewish apologists claim about him on numerous websites, etc., is for some reason I think he had some. He speaks about this himself in his books anyway. That in the 70s, when he was younger, he was a drummer for a rock band or something, and he must have got involved in that kind of lifestyle where maybe you take drugs, etc. So he had some emotional reason. He had some breakdown, and then for emotional reasons, he became a Christian. So he became a Christian not because of intellectual arguments. He became a Christian due to personal reasons, that events in his life, and then from there he was ostracized by the Jewish community because I think his family took him to some rabbis, and the rabbis, rather than answering these questions about Judaism, because I think before he left Judaism, he had some questions, and the rabbis really didn't answer his questions. Instead, they just like mocked Christianity, and it was more of a sense of the rabbis, they're just anti-Jesus, so they don't really care about anything. They're just anti-Jesus, so they didn't respond to him properly, and then he became a Christian. And then after that, the rabbis tried to bring him back, and they used to say to him, "Oh, you don't know Hebrew, you don't know Hebrew." So he started learning Hebrew in the 70s, and then he started going into rabbinic sources, and then from there, that's where his thing came from.
That's
So
where it's
now
come
he
from.
attempts, yeah, he attempts to show how Christianity is thoroughly Jewish, and that all the core beliefs that they have is found in the Jewish Tanakh and in the Talmud and in Jewish sources. So in his viewpoint will be that the New Testament is thoroughly Jewish, even though we know historically that the New Testament was influenced by Greek philosophy and a Greek worldview. He tries to show that all of that has Jewish roots and goes back into the Old Testament, and that's where his clashes with the rabbis came from.
So from what I understand then, so Dr. Brown is a born Jew, like he has the lineage. So he's by blood, he's a Jew, which means
Yes.
he cannot deny his Judaism, let's say. But then he had, as you say, an issue some point in his life that he's now using Christianity almost as a reaction to the treatment that he received from his rabbis, and then saying, "Look, you got it wrong. I'm right." I mean, I need to read the books, but that's what I'm hearing now. If that's the case, then why do Trinitarian Christians holding up so high? Because actually, he does have some theological holes here that are not that would actually put him into the ranks of a heretic. Is that the right word? Would he be considered heretical amongst traditional, normal Trinitarian Christians?
It depends which faction of
Right.
Christians you're speaking about. For example, the Catholics, they find him a heretic. And then there
Mhm.
are other Protestants that find him a heretic for other reasons, because I believe Dr. Brown's involved with the so-called charismatic movement, where they believe that people can still prophesy and speak in tongues and all this. So there's that controversy. But the reason why I believe they hold him in quite a high esteem, and why they might give him the benefit of the doubt, even when he says certain things that don't really gel well with normal Christianity, is because he's a trophy Jew for them. Christianity from its inception, especially even when it became a full-on Gentile church, they always seemed to want to validate their beliefs through the Jews, and they were very unsuccessful. So when they get somebody like Dr. Brown, who comes from that Orthodox background, and then he becomes a Christian, and then he starts writing volumes against the Jews, and most of these Christians who are Gentiles, they don't know about Jewish sources, they don't know about the Jewish context of the objections. To have a Jewish convert to Christianity to respond to the rabbis in something that on a surface level seems convincing, that's something that they've needed for years and centuries. So that's why they hold him in high esteem, because he's done something for them to make, number one, make the Christians feel like, yes, we are still part of a religion that can trace us back to that can be traced back to its Old Testament Jewish roots.
Right.
Whereas they're always being accused of the Trinity being from Greek paganism, etc. So they like feeling validated, and on top of that, they have somebody to respond to the rabbis now, which, even though they've had other apologists in the past responding to the rabbis, nobody really done it on the level of Dr. Brown, like with direct debates with the rabbis, and to that level where I'll be honest, he has held his own in many debates with the rabbis.
Yeah. Well, actually, before we get too far, I want to ask, because there's a lot of folks in the comments saying, who is Zakir Husain? So for those that don't know, can you give us a little bit of background as to what is MDI and how was your involvement with it, and how did this debate come about?
MDI is an organization called the Muslim Debate Initiative. I'll just give a bit of a background of how I came into apologetics in the first place, because this was never planned. Around 2010, I had a friend who was from a Christian background, who he wasn't religious at all, but all of a sudden he started saying, like, I feel like God is calling me, and I want to know a bit about Islam. So at the time, I wasn't practicing at all. I think a few months after these conversations, I started practicing myself. But at that point, I was just, as they say, a cultural Muslim. So he started asking me questions about Islam, and even though I wasn't practicing, I did have a decent amount of knowledge.
As you do,
exactly.
As you do, yeah, exactly.
So I answered some of his questions, and he did seem interested in Islam. Now, his mother was a born-again Christian. So what she started doing is, when she started seeing that her son is interested in Islam, she started bringing the minister from the church to to try to grab him back to Christianity. So then he'd come to me and he'd say, well, the minister at my church or the pastor at my church said this and said that, and how would you respond? And I didn't really know. So I started, I remember in the 90s when I was young, my dad had some Ahmadiyya tapes lying around in the front room. So I started checking Sheikh Ahmed Didat's debates, and then I'd answer my friends' questions according to that, and then he'd go back. So what his mom did is she set up some sessions at their house with this minister, and they invited me along. So I would go there, and this minister would try to bash Islam and try to keep my friend on Christianity. So I would go back every week, watch a few Sheikh Ahmed Didat debates, go back to the house the next week, try to respond. But he was getting the upper hand because I was new to all this. So I started struggling. So what happened is I found out that there was another debater in Birmingham. His name's Brother Ayaz Udin. He stopped debating, but he was debating around that time, 2010, 2011. I heard he had some debates with pastors. So I tried to get hold of his number through a brother called Tasneef, who Brother Hashim knows. So somebody gave me Tasneef's number, and I went to meet him in Green Lane Masjid for the first time. And I sat down with him and I told him my situation, that I've been meeting this pastor and he's getting the upper hand on me. I try to do as much as I can from the Sheikh Ahmed Didat debates, but this is all I know. I know my limitations. So he got me in touch with Brother Ayaz, and a week later, Brother Ayaz went with me to their house to have a discussion with that minister and just demolished the minister on the spot, to the point where the minister said that, oh, me and Zakir, we've been having civil discussions every week, and now you've turned up and you've made it like this and made it like that, just because my friend questioned him. Now he's my friend. At the time I'd first met him, just because he asked him a few trick questions on John 1:1 that the minister couldn't answer, and the minister's like, he's just You could tell his veins were starting to come out from his forehead, etc. So from that point, I said to myself that I never want to allow myself to be in a position where some Christian missionary can mock the deen and I don't know how to defend it. So from that point, I started watching Sheikh Ahmed Deedat debates, Dr. Zakir Naik debates. I came across Dr. Shabir Ali, and I think it was a few years later when actually Hyde Park, believe it or not, in the 90s, my cousin had a Dawah in a Park tape with Abdul Rahim Green and a few others. So I knew about it, but I didn't watch it until a few years later after I started reading books, etc.
Yeah.
So
Brother
that's how
Mansur
I
is
got
in the
into
tape as well.
apologetics.
Yeah, Brother Mansur's on that tape as well. Yeah, he is. Yeah,
He may have been, but I don't. I remember Sheikh Abdul Rahim Green, and I don't recall Brother Mansur in that, but I do know he was there in the late 90s as well. So
I know
that's
Ayaz
how I
as
got into
well,
it.
even though I haven't met him in person, but I know Brother Ayaz as well. He was in our group. Do you remember, Zakir?
Yeah, he was.
Mashallah, brilliant brother. I don't know why he gave up debating. He's got busy with life, I guess.
Yeah, life just gets his hold of all of us.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah.
So yeah, Sheikh Ahmed Deedat, Zakir Naik, Rahimullah, both of them. I mean, mashallah, they have benefited the dawah scenes greatly in their days and still do. Alhamdulillah, we have Ustad Zakir Husain, mashallah, to take the torch on from there. And please don't give up debating.
Well, so the history then. So from there,
Yeah.
because we're talking about how we get. Sorry, Brother Mansur, you can come in.
I was going to say, just from there, so you got interested in there. You started looking at the resources, and even Hyde Park videos was something important to look at, because there was this live debates, the crossfire type debates going on, and then since then, after that, what led you to do more? I mean,
What happened after that is when I started reading a few books, because back then compared to now, the apologetics was much simpler. Like at the start, you could just read like one or two books and you'd be ready to have a little debate on the subject. Now you need like 50 different books because it's gone that advanced compared to 10, 12 years ago. So Brother Ayaz was debating at that time, and he had, before I met him, about a year before, he had a debate with a local Christian apologist by the name of Carlton MacDonald, who Brother Adnan Rashid had debated about a year before I got into apologetics, maybe 2009. So what happened is Ayaz started bringing Carlton to my house, and we started having in-house debates for practice. So like my first debate with him, I literally word for word copied Sheikh Ahmed Deedat from his debate with Anisha Rosh. So we started practicing having debates with Carlton. Obviously for Carlton, it was a real debate. For me, it was just practice. So we started practicing, and I started realizing this is how debates go. Carlton was using something called a lexicon against me. I didn't even know what a lexicon was. So from there, I started gaining more and more confidence. And then we arranged my first debate, which was in 2011 with another Messianic Jew called Adam Hardy, who was a young lad at the time who knew Hebrew, and he was a Jew. He was another Jew who became Christian. That was my first stage debate. But my first proper one, as you know, was the one with James White in 2012. So that's how I got into moderated debates, from the practice debates I had with Carlton MacDonald in a house.
And how many times have you discussed this specific question, the one for this debate that we've had? Is Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the Bible before?
I've debate. This was the first debate that I had in 2011 with Adam Hardy. Then I had this debate with James White, then with Samuel Green.
On the same topic?
On the same topic.
Okay.
And now the same debate with Dr. Michael Brown. And I had a debate with David Wood, which wasn't directly this topic, but it's related to this topic. It was about the covenant of Ishmael and Isaac, which is connected. So I would say 4.5 times.
Okay, so we can call you an expert on this topic then, in that case, seeing as you discussed it so many times over the years. Alhamdulillah.
Just a student.
Alhamdulillah.
So in terms of your preparation for this debate, and also in anticipation of the actual debate, I believe it was organized a long time ago, but it just materialized recently. So just give us a background info with regards to this particular debate on is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Bible with Dr. Brown?
Well, I think it was about 2016. This is how. This is why I issued the challenge to Dr. Michael Brown, because I realized what was going on. So in 2016, you've heard of that apologist Jonathan McClatchy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He had this live stream going on, some online academy thing, where he invited Dr. Brown, and they were the title of this stream was "Ministering to Muslims." So there were Dr. Brown and Jonathan McClatchy were speaking about how you basically give Christian dawah to the Muslims, and in the Q&A, Brother Yusuf Ismail from South Africa and Dr. Brown started speaking about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the Bible. And I noticed that from Dr. Brown's angle, there was this condescending tone and this kind of arrogance. And then he challenged Yusuf Ismail to this topic. So then I thought in my mind that this is a topic I deal with anyway. And now they're going to Dr. Brown and they're getting him involved in the Muslim scene, because first he was just debating rabbis, but now it seems like he wants to jump on the Muslim bandwagon. So, and he had this arrogant tone towards Yusuf Ismail. He even gave the example to Jonathan McClatchy of Yusuf Ismail. I think it was in regards to Yusuf Ismail, but he said Muslims challenging me on this topic is like me challenging the heavyweight boxer, the heavyweight boxing champion of the world to a fight. So this is the level of arrogance I felt was coming from his direction, that us Muslims challenging him on this topic of the Old Testament is like challenging Mike Tyson. That's how confident he was in himself. So I couldn't handle that. So I just issued the challenge out to him in 2016. But even though I issued the challenge to him then, and I read his books, I didn't prepare that whole time for him.
When you say issued a challenge,
to prepare.
Sorry, Akhi. When you said issued a challenge, what does that mean? You issued a challenge. What did you do? Did you print a banner, stick it on a plane, and send it over to the US or something? What did you do?
I recorded an audio on WhatsApp challenging Dr. Michael Brown, and I sent it to Ijaz Ahmed, who then made a video and put some Jewish rabbis in the background and released it on Facebook. And then Dr. Brown basically replied, "Challenge accepted," in 2016.
Got it. Alhamdulillah. Okay, yeah. So that's how we issue challenges.
So we are in 2023.
Exactly. This is a long time ago. This
for
is
the
old
debate
technology
to materialize.
Yeah.
So what happened in between? Yeah.
Well, in the original challenge, I said that we'll debate this topic anytime Dr. Brown comes to the UK. So it was a few years before Dr. Brown came to the UK. So that's one of the reasons why it was delayed. Then there was one or two occasions. Is it still? Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay, because it's frozen on my screen. So one or two times he did come to the UK, but he didn't inform me. Afterwards, he clarified that it was the once. But anyway, he even came to Birmingham. So I was quite upset because part of the agreement is when you come to the UK, you let me know. We'll have the debate. So I messaged him saying that I'm quite upset because you've not only come to the UK, you've literally come to my city. So let's meet up and arrange this debate. And he said, I can't debate on such short notice, but we can meet up if you like. I'm quite busy, but if you come to me in 20 minutes, I've got a 5-minute window to speak to you. And then I checked where he is, and the location was like 40 minutes away. So he needs me to come to him in 20 minutes for a 5-minute chat. And the location's 40 minutes away. That was impossible. So I said to him, I won't be able to make it. So he goes, okay, then next time. Then COVID happened. We were supposed to debate in 2020, I believe. It was getting arranged. Then COVID happened. And then after that, he had another slot to come to the UK. But I think Brother Abdullah never managed to get a suitable venue in time, because I wasn't involved in the organization of the debate. So I found out afterwards that it was something like that and it never happened. Plus there were discussions happening behind the scenes, like Dr. Brown wanted to have a double debate, whereas it's Dr. James White and Dr. Brown against me and another Muslim, but that's something I refused because I wanted to debate Dr. White one-on-one, Dr. Brown one-on-one. So that's what led to the delay.
Okay, so for somebody who was so confident, who felt that Muslims were not even worth debating, he has all these academic credentials, and he now needs a friend to help him. I mean, it sounds like, you know, something out of a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show. You know, can I call a friend or you know, use a helpline or something? I mean, this is actually, I think, testament to the fact that even though you yourself, I mean, let's be clear, how many PhDs do you have, Brother Zakir? Equivalent to
0.
Dr. Brown. Exactly.
0.
So we have on the Islamic side somebody with 0 PhDs who does this purely because they want to, you know, defend Islam from the critics. And on the other side, we have somebody who is a world-renowned academic from one of the top universities and seminaries in the world who now needs a friend to help him in the debate. And he's calling on James White. I mean, this is the level that we're talking about here.
He wants to tag team with someone he'll feel confident with.
Exactly. It needs somebody to hold his hand. So,
Mashallah,
I mean, look,
Zakir wanted to do it solo, you know, and that's always been the plan for him for the last, 6-7 years now.
Yeah.
And whether you know, finally even agreeing to the debate and showing the performance that he has, I mean, do you think he'll want to debate you again? Because initially the plan was to have 2 debates, right? What happened to that?
Yeah. The second topic was supposed to be, is Jesus God? But for some reason, Dr. Brand didn't have enough time in his schedule, so we agreed to leave that for the future and get this one done. Because if I had insisted on debating that topic as well, I don't think this one would have been possible as well. So he opened up one day, one slot in his busy schedule for this debate, and the other one will be sometime in the future, inshallah. So
We're looking forward to
Allah
this. I'm
knows
sure
best whether
round.
that one will happen or not. But
What is the other topic again?
is Jesus God?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, if Christians are so confident that Jesus is God, he should be, you know, more than willing to debate this topic to demonstrate that, you know, with all the proofs and evidence. They shouldn't be like being shying away from it. That should be their, you know, like, you know, something that they're, you know, bread and butter for them. So why would someone even be reluctant and hesitant to debate that topic? I mean, that shows volumes.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
I think
really
the Jewish
not
people that
confident?
he kind of appeals to will crucify him for that, because
literally.
That's exactly what I had in mind. What Brother Hashim said, he just hit the nail on the head. I personally feel that on that topic, he's hesitant because he's going to have to go full on Orthodox Christianity with that, and it might just not go the same way compared to how he's trying to bridge the gap between Christianity and Judaism. That's my personal opinion on that. That's why that topic's difficult.
You know, Brother Zakir, you know, I'm listening to this, and he reminds me of like a modern day Paul from the Bible. You know, he's like a modern day version of Paul out of the Bible, which is he comes in and tries to make everything Jewish, but it's not Jewish anymore. The law is relevant, but the law is not relevant. It's almost like he's in the same vein. He's trying to do what Paul did, but a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, it seems like that way. He wants to please everyone. So to the Jews, I'm a Jew. To the Gentiles, I'm a Gentile. You know, that kind of attitude. And it's pretty similar, I would say, yes. So Zakir, how did you prepare for this debate? Tell us about the background. I know it's been a long time. I mean, if I was waiting for a debate to happen for 7 years, I would probably given up. Unlike you, mashallah, you held on to the debate and you kept pestering him. I don't know what happened in the background, but yeah, you wanted to make sure that this debate happened, whether late or. I really applaud your patience for that, mashallah. You know, 7 years is a long time.
Well, to that, I just want to add: when did Brother Abdullah Andalusi get involved? Because he's not been mentioned so far in any of this. But he was. I understand from the brothers here, he was actually at the debate as well. He was sort of chairing it or emceeing it or something.
He was actually involved since 2020 when the first time when Dr. Brand actually told us that I might have a window in my busy schedule to come to the UK. That's when I actually spoke to Abdullah and said, can you organize this now? Before that, because it was all theoretical, I didn't actually approach Abdullah and say that, can you organize this? Because there was no firm date. So it was actually 2020 where Abdullah got involved to try to organize it the first time, but then COVID happened and a lot of other things. So he's been involved since 2020 trying to
Wow.
organize this.
So so leading up to the event itself, can you take us through some of the ups and downs and challenges and maybe roadblocks that you hit to get to this final outcome?
Well, the first thing was about actually setting it up. There was a time where even Brother Hashim and Brother Mansur mentioned in our WhatsApp group that they don't think this debate's going to happen because I had put a lot of my apologetics on hold for this debate because I'm the type of person who I don't like debating 50 times, 100 times. I'd rather focus on one step at a time. So if I've got an objective in apologetics, for example, I want to fulfill that objective because there's a purpose for me. I feel that there should be a concrete purpose, and I shouldn't debate for the sake of debating. Right. Now, I knew that Dr. Brown has to be dealt with on this topic because he was coming from a position of, in my opinion, ego and arrogance and looking down on the Muslims. Like in our Old Testament, Mohammad, an Arab. No, we're from the Judeo-Christian background. Everything's about Davidic Messiah and Isaiah 53 and Jesus, and these Muslims, they're just mocking our Bible, etc. And the fact that the Christians looked up to Dr. Brown as their trophy and they're using him as a source, I knew that somebody has to engage him on this and shut this whole his arrogance down, and this Christian arrogance, which manifested itself in the debate as well, which proves my point, because Brother Mansur mentioned that the Christians were on edge, and I noticed that as well. You could like put a butter knife in the atmosphere. I've never experienced an audience like this. Like everybody was like they're watching a horror movie or something. They were on edge, but they were also, a lot of them were laughing and mocking and especially to what Dr. Brown was doing, in my opinion. Look, I know my own limitations. I'm not the most eloquent speaker. I don't get paid for this. I'm not. I haven't trained on no speaking courses, nothing. What I do part time in my spare time. I buy my own books and I just read and I just do the best of that I can. So I cannot outspeak Dr. James White. I cannot outspeak Dr. Michael Brown. They can turn on the rhetoric and this is impossible and make me, who's debating them on the stage, want to hug them as well because the speech is that powerful. But the way I see it is, even if at the time the immediate audience may fall for the rhetoric, I do feel that when it goes on YouTube and people are actually sitting at home and listening and actually pondering over it and pressing pause and rewinding back to what he said and what I said, I feel that over time people start realizing that where the actual substance of the arguments are. And I even experienced this with my first debate with Dr. James White, where the first few weeks every Christian comment was just bashing me. But I noticed over time I was starting to get more and more respect, because over time I think they started to realize that there is some substance to what I'm saying, and the rhetoric can only the rhetoric wears off after a certain amount of time. It can't hold you forever.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. The truth stands by itself. You don't need any sugarcoating, no rhetoric, none of that. And mashallah, Brother Zakir Husain, inshallah, we will look at these points in the debate, in the next review for the live stream, which we're going to have, inshallah, once the debate has been released by MDI. So those asking in the chat whether the debate's been released, no, it has not been published by MDI. We ourselves are waiting for that, and that's the reason we had this part one of the review, and inshallah we'll have a much more detailed review of the actual debate point by point in the next part of this live stream, inshallah.
Yeah. Just on that note, just to end this conspiracy theory, because there's Christians going around and we know who the Christian is from Hyde Park. I won't mention her name. Anyway, they say that the Muslims lost so badly that we're not allowing the footage to go up. But a fellow Christian apologist has actually corrected her on that. That the reason there was a delay is because there were 5 different cameras that recorded this and about 4 different mics. So what we're doing is combining the best footage with the best audio to make the best possible video, and then it's going to be released, and it's scheduled to be released today, hopefully by 5 o'clock. So most likely it will be today. Worst comes to worst, it'll be by tomorrow, depending on how long it takes to upload on YouTube. So nobody is hiding. The only reason the videos have been taken down is because there was an agreement, a gentleman's agreement, that we will all share footage with each other, and then once the footage has been shared, we will make the video, and then MDI, who were the main organizers, will get 24 hours of exclusive time to have the video on their channel, and then Dr. Brown and the other Christians can upload it. And Dr. Brown agreed to this, and he corrected this conspiracy theory by saying that this is true. MDI has the first 24 hours, so it should be on tonight, and there's no Muslims have lost, so we're scared to put the footage up. Nonsense.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Soko Films, who actually, I don't know, due to some miscommunication, according to him, he did apologize in a recent video he has released for releasing the video without the permission of MDI. So anyway, I mean, let's put that aside. It's not something that we are scared to do. If Zakir was scared to have the debate, why would he challenge Dr. Brown? It wasn't the other way around. It was Zakir challenging Dr. Brown, not Dr. Brown challenging Zakir. Yeah. And he has waited 7 years for this. So Alhamdulillah, I'm sure he's prepared, and he has done a wonderful job at the debate, where I myself was present along with brother Mansur. Yeah.
After the debate, sorry, Brother Mohammad, just one last point.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Go ahead.
After the debate, Dr. Brown did say to me that he didn't appreciate that I was coming across quite aggressive on Twitter. This was about 6 months ago. And he goes, because of that reason, he was about to decline debating me. But I did apologize to him if I came across as aggressive, but I did say to him that sometimes you have to do that to make the fight happen. Since Dr. Brown likes giving examples of boxers, I use the same thing, that if I hadn't done that, I don't think this debate would have happened today. So on Twitter, I pressured him and called him out in front of everybody and said that let's make this debate happen. And I think I did the right thing, because look, the debate actually happened after that happened on Twitter.
Yeah, I was going to make 2 points. So I think, first of all, just to clarify again, there was a formal agreement in the background between MDI and the other groups that this particular sequence of actions is what would happen. So the fact that somebody released some footage early was actually, number one, we're going to put it down to oversight, mistake, misunderstanding. We're going to give them the best possible color here. But by rights and by contractual agreement, MDI have a 24-hour window that they agreed everything would be released. That's the first thing. Second thing is this idea that this debate somehow has already been won or lost or whatever, is if you were not at the debate, for example, the brothers here, Brother Hashim and Brother Mansur, were actually at the debate. They witnessed the whole thing themselves. They were physically there. They have a right to make a decision like this. If you are not at the debate and you haven't seen the debate, then you have no right to make any kind of opinion like this yet. And I think the third point is, I saw some of those comments on your earlier debates. I mean, over the years, alhamdulillah, and I've watched them. And one of the things I've noticed is, for the discerning, thoughtful seeker who is genuinely looking for truth, I found comments in those videos where people have said, you know, I listened to this carefully. And in between, I'm saying, you know, I looked past the showmanship and the circus tactics that were being used. And what I found is that the arguments from the Muslim side were solid and they stood the test of time. I'm summarizing a lot of comments, but this is essentially what I felt. And I think at the end of the day, this is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road sometimes for some of these videos. We do this not because of personal gain and not because we want to win, grandstand ourselves or win a trophy somewhere. We do this because Islam is the truth and we want to share the truth with everybody. And Zakir does this, as he said, part-time. You know, nobody pays him a salary to do this, nor does he have a paid professorship at a university somewhere and whatever. None of that. So we do this off our own backs, including, Mansur, Hashim, myself as well. And we do this because we want to share the truth of Islam. And at the end of the day, when you look past all the showmanship and the circus tactics, the truth always shines through. Now, whether you, with your own biased lenses, can't see that, that is a problem that you have personally. It's got nothing to do with what's being said, because the content stands out on its own. That's all I wanted to summarize what we just said earlier.
So at one point, I remember, like Brother Zakir mentioned,
we can't hear you, Brother Mansur.
Oh, okay, Mansur, we can't hear you at all. Yeah. Okay, so I was just saying that we were actually debating whether this debate was going to happen or not, as Brother Zakir mentioned earlier. So what we were debating about is whether Ali Dawah's marriage documentary will be released first, or whether Zakir Husain versus Brown will happen first.
I actually thought the marriage documentary was going to come out first, actually.
Can you hear me now?
Did. Yes, we can hear you now. Yes,
okay. I just was trying to add to what Brother Mohammad said on the actual debate approach or how things happen. One of the things, this is something that I would remind everyone to bear in mind when you're watching the debate, and as you will be watching with us, inshallah, when we review the debate footage in live, in a live stream, you have to differentiate between showmanship and the real substance of the debate, what's been argued. Because you can be a rhetorician, a very eloquent speaker with zero content, with zero substance, and you might convince people like, wow, look at that, with no arguments. That's the power of rhetoric. It's even described, in certain culture and linguistic cultures where it's like magic, sihr. Okay, eloquence can also be like sihr, magic, because it has magical properties in which it influences people, takes away from the actual substance itself, from the illusion that it provides through its rhetoric. So what you would notice, as we have been noticing, unfortunately, this same kind of showmanship that happened within the debate. We want to go beneath that showmanship, the surface, and look at the arguments. And this is where, what I'm saying, this is a game changer. And this is just a preamble to what's going to come next and what is coming in terms of establishing without any doubt left anymore from the actual source text with scholarship backing, where Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioned. So this is where I want to just touch on this topic, Ustad Zakir, in this point. The first thing that was misunderstood by your opponent is that you're attacking the Bible. Just because you are highlighting a methodology, you're highlighting, you're peeling the layers of the onions in terms of how to look at the substance inside, in terms of how you would approach. Methodology is important. I mean, do not Christians realize that with all of these messianic prophecies that you know about, there is not a single mention in the name of Jesus Christ in the Old Testament? Why is this so? But you are led to believe that he's mentioned throughout the Old Testament. The prophecies abound so much that as if like you just open up the Old Testament and he's shining in the pages. There's not a single mention of his name. And what the New Testament writers did, and this is what I would like Zakir to explain a little bit more, maybe here, if you think so, or maybe leave it for later, how the New Testament authors approached this. Did they approach to find Christ in the New Testament by simply reading the text, or they were adding into the text, twisting the text, misrepresenting the text, to the point they were inventing prophecies which didn't even exist? So when you approached, is it not important, like maybe we shouldn't go into that detail, is it not important to understand the methodology in finding prophecies and prophetic statements relating to a prophet or someone to come after who's prophesied? Isn't it important to understand that methodology, first of all, without going into maybe, whether Prophet is mentioned there or not?
Definitely. There were some Muslims who said to me that you should have kept the example from Matthew and John for the rebuttals. But I said to them that I've read Dr. Brown's books and I've been watching his debates and I've been basically studying him, and that was needed right from the start to basically put him in his place, because as I've mentioned before, he was coming from a position of arrogance, a position of ego, which he showed in the debate as well. Like, he's proven his case, and the Christian standards are this high, and the Muslims, they come in. It's the way we feel when Qadianis try to prove their points to us. That's how he was treating us. So I just wanted to just bring him back down to reality right from the start, because I didn't want it to be a case of there's me quoting Isaiah 42, there's me quoting Deuteronomy 18, and in the back of their head, they've got, no, this is all Jesus. So they don't even want to open their mind up to what I'm saying. So I wanted to, as I say, destroy and rebuild. So destroy their foundation, their position of arrogance, that they've proven that these texts are about Jesus by just showing how Matthew and John and the New Testament manipulated data to make it look like Jesus fulfilled certain things. So destroy that position of arrogance, their base, and then rebuild with our case. So that's why I felt it was important right off the bat to just put them in a place and show the level, their standard for prophecy. So if you notice in the debate, that set the whole pace for Dr. Brown, where he's trying to deny the prophet, going down to the way the Jews pronounce the letters and the double mem, and he's trying to do it, analyze it to a microscopic level, whereas he's got these big issues when it comes to the New Testament's case, and yet when it comes to the Muslim, he has to zoom in this to this atomic level to refute our case. So that was demonstrated that you've got this much big issues, yeah, you deny our case, but to deny our case, you have to focus on this atomic level. So that's the reason I did that. So it was a psychological. I felt like it was a game of chess between me and him, and I needed that to checkmate him. And I do personally feel that it was successful.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Because this is very, very crucial to understand when we look at the actual debate footage, inshallah, in our next review, when MDI publishes the debate today, hopefully today or latest tomorrow, maybe, that when we look at the methodology that's been used to find respective prophets, whether Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or Isa alayhi salam or Jesus Christ in the Old Testament, we have to have a consistent, robust methodology in which we don't just pick and choose. We don't just make arbitrary interpretations. We let the text speak, and we understand the text in its holistic context. And this is exactly what we would like our viewers, when they are going to see and enjoy the debate, to come in the review that we will do, inshallah, the contents and the substance which establishes Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Bible or not. Because on the periphery, on the surface, it might go over their heads because of the showmanship, because of someone saying, oh, you don't know anything, there's no mention of him anyway. Just like if I were to, if the Jewish people were to say, there's no mention of Jesus Christ whatsoever, you're just coming up with all this ploy and games. These kind of rhetorics and false prideful assertion doesn't establish the truth. It simply is a smoke screen. So we will be, inshallah, uncovering and unpacking those smoke screen, go deep down into the arguments and show where the arguments are. In fact, I was just going through your arguments that you presented, and see how you've linked up from one to the other to get a holistic understanding. And inshallah, as we go through the footage review, we will see that this is something that the Christian counterparts now have to take on board. They are no longer just going to be using like, oh, he's not mentioned there. They have to have now a response, which they will be struggling to find. And this is something that they will have to wait for it to really unpack what's been presented in terms of the debate. As the arguments are presented in this form, what is expected from the Christian counterparts? That, look, enough of sugarcoating and enough of your showmanship from your apologists and so on and so forth. Now we have presented in this debate, this is a historical moment for you to now wake up and then tell us and give us a valid justification of negating or not accepting the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The case has been put forward there. The argument is laid there with all the evidence that are that's been presented. You now have to come with a response. If you're not able to provide a response and you're just simply doing this rhetorical game, then of course we can't help you. But those who are sincere, those who are honest, and those who are truth-seeking, when they look at the evidence, they will weigh the evidence for itself. And this is where the game is now going to change. It's a game changer. So Jazakallah khairan for the evidences that you presented, inshallah. But as I understand, these are only a minute sample, some very small examples, a taster for what to come.
Definitely. And I had about this much papers filled with sources at the debate, but I didn't have time to pick up one paper. There was so much more that could have been said, because Dr. Brown contradicted his own methodology and himself on many occasions that I don't even know where to start and where to finish. We will go into more detail in the when we have the footage up, but I just want to give one example of where I think the showmanship comes from. For example, he did the same thing that Dr. James White did in the debate, where when the heat is on, they start going into preacher mode, where he quoted Isaiah 53, and he quoted it, and look, then what did he say at the end of it? Look, I didn't have to explain anything. It's so obvious that I didn't have to explain anything. This is what you call a prophecy. So he's trying to say that Isaiah 53 is so obviously about Jesus that I just have to read it, and there's no issue. Look, you know, it's a prophecy. Yet in his book, he has probably 30 pages plus trying to explain to the Jews that this is about Jesus and all of their objections. So if it's as easy as Dr. Brown saying, you just read it and this is Jesus, and so why do you have to write 30 pages plus responding to the Jews? So this is just showmanship.
Yeah, funny that you mentioned this, because when I was listening, I was thinking, really? You're quoting a text which says that he shall see his seed and prolong his days. He shall see his seed. Do Christians really believe that Jesus, had children? The Messiah had children from his seed? How do they even go around this text? Because it's clearly, obviously, self-evident that Christ cannot be referred to in that particular passage as the person being spoken of, because that person will see his seed, his progeny, his zir. Yeah.
That's the interesting thing about that is as well is like Surah 3 Ayah 7 says that those with disease in their heart, they'll take the ambiguous text and they'll basically leave the clear text. And this a prime example is in Isaiah 53 when it comes to them interpreting it about Jesus. For example, the concept of dying and resurrecting, that metaphor is found all over the Bible, even for the children of Israel. So even the parts of Isaiah 53 that look like the servant actually dies and his life is prolonged, it could be understood as metaphorically, and there's other texts all over the Bible that prove that. So when it comes to the part which can be taken metaphorically, the Christian missionaries such as Dr. Brown will insist that it's literal, and the servant dies and he resurrects. But then on the other hand, the phrase he will see seed everywhere else in the Bible, and Dr. Brown admits that every example he gives to try to prove it can be understood as metaphorical, he admits that it could be understood as literal. The Jews insist that every time that phrase see seed or see his seed is used in the Old Testament, it's always literal. So what these Christians have done then is the phrase about dying and resurrected, which in other parts of the Bible can be used metaphorically, they insist is literal. But then the part about seeing seed, which is literal everywhere else in the Bible, they'll say no, it's spiritual, twisting everything around to make Jesus fit.
Yeah, that's the same thing they do with the Trinity as well. When Jesus himself says the Father is the only true God, they go all around the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, to actually find the Trinity, which isn't there, which the church didn't establish until 300 years after Jesus ascended. So it's the same old story, where there's the Old Testament or the New Testament. They ignore the explicit passages and they latch on to this implicit or even ambiguous passages, to be honest with you. This is not the way a proper investigation and research is done, specifically when it comes to matter of your salvation, your afterlife. If you're fooling yourself, nobody else. If the text is supposed to be teaching you, it should be all over the place. The Christians usually say the term Tawheed is not in the Quran, but they don't even know what the term Tawheed means. It means oneness of Allah, and oneness of Allah is seen throughout the Quran. Okay? Can we say the same thing? The term Trinity is not there in the Bible, but not only that, the concept is not there anywhere in the Bible either. But still, they'll keep on banging that, yes, it is there, and they'll flick out every single ambiguous terminology, passage, phrase, whatever it is. But they will ignore what Jesus Christ himself said in John 17:3, which is much more explicit than anything they can bring. So yeah, it's an old story, I guess.
Yeah, so I will see all the time. So, Brother Zakir, how did you think the debate went from your perspective? Because I was there, so I don't want to give everything, but I'm telling you that the Muslims as well as Christians, they need to see this debate. They need to have their pen and paper ready, or their phone when they're taking notes, and get all these arguments and leave the smoke screen and the rhetorics and the charismatic voices and assertion that's been said. Make notes of the substance, because this is going to be a new chapter in which now the engagement about Prophet Muhammad in the Bible is no longer going to be just simply brushed aside. Now they will be on the defense, trying their best to come up with some response. So as I'm saying, I don't want to give too much away. We want to watch it together, and we want to see how the evidence is actually presented without any smokescreen, going into the direct source itself, and then what it means now for the next generation of people in Christian Muslim relationship, or even maybe Judeo-Christian Muslim relationship of apologetics and so on, what it means for that, because this is the next level, the next chapter in this. How did you think the debate went? This is something that we would like to hear from you, from your own understanding and perception of how the debate went.
In my personal opinion, I'm fully satisfied with how the debate went. Alhamdulillah, to me, it felt like, I don't know how it appears to others, but to me, I felt like this was the easiest debate I've ever had. And that may be because, like, when I debated Dr. James White in 2012, I was inexperienced, and it was my first time, and obviously my knowledge was and research was a lot less back then. But this time, to me, it felt like a breeze in the park. And yeah, it went very easy for me. It may have looked like I was having a tough time, but that's just the way. That's my personality. I'm a passionate person. I'm unorganized. I admit that. But it seems like I'm all over the place, or it may seem like I'm struggling. But wallahi, this was in my opinion, the easiest debate I've ever had.
Yeah, and we will see that as well, inshallah, during when we watch the debate together in our next review with Ustad Zakir Husain on this very debate between Dr. Brown and Zakir Husain, and we look at the rebuttals. This is where you'll appreciate our brother Zakir in terms of how much the substance that has been debated for and against, because it's only then that you realize where the truth is being hidden, or where the truth is being submerged, or where the truth is now being manifest. So during the counter rebuttals and the counter rebuttals, these are the areas where one can be fully sure of whether the position is being demonstrated. So alhamdulillah, Zakir, if this is how we felt, and this is, I'm sure the few of us who were there within the debate, this is how we felt, and we felt a bit sorry about your opponent, that he could have done better. He could have prepared even more, because he didn't seem to have prepared to the level of his academic scholarship to a debate which is so important. Because if he loses the debate, and it looks like in all evidence that shows that he hasn't really argued your points at all, the implication is serious and severe. Such an implication in which the Christians now will have to go and do so much reading and so much background check from the Old Testament on these issues, and hopefully in doing so, it will bring them to Islam, inshallah, because now they're no longer just simply taking the words of their champion. Is now going back to the roots of the source text and see Why is it that this wasn't mentioned to us? Why is it that we didn't know? Why was it that this was all hidden away from us? Why is it that there was a smoke screen, that there was no possibility of Prophet Muhammad being mentioned, and now the argument seems to be suggesting otherwise? So alhamdulillah, this was a very good preamble of things to come in the future. Do you want to touch on, before we go into Q&A with our audience, inshallah, just touch about a little bit about the project that you're involved with Ustad Adnan and Brother Zakaria, in terms of what you're dealing on that very subject matter, inshallah?
Basically, for the as Abu Zakaria, he posted, I think it was on his Facebook a couple of days back. We've been working on a project for the last 4 years about the Prophet, peace be upon him, in the Bible. The book is going to be called Abraham Fulfilled. We've completed about 8 chapters, so we've completed the Old Testament. It's just the last chapter on the New Testament left, where we cover the Paraclete, etc. So why we feel this project is important is because when it comes to this topic, the Muslims have been very, very lazy. What we've done is we've never built upon the arguments of Sheikh Didat's days. So we got comfortable with reading The Choice and watching the debates from the 80s, and we didn't want to up our game when it came to this topic. Whereas the Christians and the Jews, they took it more seriously, and they started bringing new objections left, right, and center, and new criteria to be like Moses, etc. And we took our time trying to catch up. But why this book is going to be a game changer, in my opinion, inshallah, is because there's a few things that we deal with that's different. The first thing is the way this topic has been presented in the past is, like Will mentioned, that the prophets foretold in Deuteronomy 18. The prophets foretold in Deuteronomy 33. The prophets foretold in Isaiah 42. But we've never given a consistent narrative. What does this all mean? How does it fit together? Like you notice with the Christians, even though most of their appeal to the Old Testament is falsehood, they still give you a story. Like you heard Dr. Brown say it in the debate, where the Messiah had to be born here, and he had to do miracles, and he had to die, and he had to resurrect for the sins of the world, etc. It's all a narrative that fits together, so they can give you a full story, and they say this is foretold here, this is foretold there. Whereas us Muslims, we've been presenting individual prophecies, but we're never given a proper narrative. So now we're going to give a proper narrative to explain what does this all mean from Genesis to Malachi and including the New Testament. How does this come together to tell you about an Arabian prophet? Now, on that note, like Brother Mansur, he mentioned that why don't they seem to accept this? A lot of the people from the Judeo-Christian background. The reason being is because most of them are victims of propaganda. What they don't realize is in the Bible, there's a lot of propaganda going on. You'll notice, like, for example, you'll have 2 different stories of why Esau lost his blessing to Jacob. One story, I believe he was hungry. The other story, Jacob impersonated him, and his father Isaac blessed Jacob, thinking it was Esau, and then Jacob got the blessing, and that's why the children of Israel are more blessed over the Edomites, for example. Now, what is this really? The scholars will tell you that this was later Israelites just writing propaganda against the Edomites. Then you get the story of Prophet Lot sleeping with his own daughters, and the Moabites come from there. So they're basically slandering the Moabites by these stories. Now, we wonder why they won't accept an Arab prophet, or why they slander, like sometimes as Muslims, why do they slander the Prophet, peace be upon him, so much? But they haven't even spared their own prophets, let alone Christians of Jews today. In the Bible itself, you notice the stories about, like, we know what they've attributed to David. I don't know whether I should repeat it here or not, but I think for the sake of information after, they slandered him with the story of adultery, for example. Now, where did this come from? Scholars will tell you that this was, they say in history, after the time of David and Solomon, the kingdom of Israel split into 2 kingdoms, the northern kingdom and then the southern kingdom of Judah. And so they were writing polemics against each other. So the northern kingdom no longer wanted to be underneath the authority of the house of Judah, which was the clan of David. So they started writing stories against David that he committed adultery, and his son Solomon, he committed he became a pagan towards the end of his life, etc. Then you got stories in the Torah where the priesthood was only allowed for Harun alayhi Islam, Aaron, and nobody else. But then Deuteronomy says, no, it's for the whole tribe of Levi. So what's going on is different authors from different lineages are trying to boost up their own lineage and give their own self-prestige. So how does that connect to why they reject the prophet? Because even though there's prophecies all over the Old Testament showing that there's something going to happen in Arabia and with the prophet, you also see a kind of counter narrative coming, trying to make the same thing happen in the house of David. And that's where this whole Davidic Messiah thing comes from. It's like a rival narrative compared to the Arabian narrative. Now, this wasn't brought up in the debate, but I'll bring it up now so people will hear it, and then when they watch the debate, they'll realize why they're victims of propaganda. Now, how do we know the Davidic narrative is propaganda and it's not true, and the Arabian narrative is the truth? Because the first thing is, the Deuteronomy 18 gives a test that if the Lord says something and it doesn't come to pass, then the Lord did not say this. Now, the narrative of a Davidic Messiah is falsified on every occasion. For example, you get these texts in Jeremiah before the Babylonian exile that somebody will come from the house of David. He will gather the Israelites back in the land. He will fight the enemies. He will rebuild the temple. Then what happens in the Babylonian exile? Did God raise up a Davidic Messiah? No, he raises up Cyrus, a Gentile, and Cyrus comes, he defeats the Babylonians, and then he brings the Israelites back into the land, and then he's the source of the temple being rebuilt. And Isaiah even goes as far as to say that God called Cyrus his Messiah. Now, there's scholarship out there that says that this shows that Deutero-Isaiah was rebuking what first Isaiah was claiming about somebody from the house of David coming to save the Israelites. Now, for those who don't know what I mean by Isaiah and Deutero-Isaiah, scholarship says that Isaiah chapter 1 to Isaiah chapter 39 was written by prophet Isaiah, but chapters 40 to, I believe, 55 or 56 was written by another author called Judeo-Isaiah, who came about a century or 150 years after first Isaiah. And then there's the last 10 chapters, which is Trito-Isaiah, a third person. But anyway, getting back to it, so Isaiah from chapter 1 to 39 seems to make it look like it's going to be a Davidic Messiah who's going to save the Israelites through the Babylonian exile. And then Deutero-Isaiah comes and smacks those who made this claim with Cyrus, a Gentile, coming and doing everything the Davidic Messiah was supposed to do. He's called Messiah. He brings the Israelites back in the land, according to Ezra chapter 1 as well. And he's the cause of the temple being rebuilt, according to Isaiah 44 and Isaiah and Ezra chapter 1. So we see that God has rebuked this claim, this propaganda from those who are claiming that it's going to be a Davidic Messiah. So now when it comes to the second exile, the Jews were still... they're claiming that it's still going to be fulfilled by the Davidic Messiah, and then Allah raises Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace. What does he do? He defeats the Persians, he defeats the Romans, he opens up the path, as Malachi says, he prepares the way, and then what happens? The Muslims come into the land, they clean up Jerusalem. And if you read the historical sources, there were Israelites who became Muslim who went to Jerusalem at the time of Umar radiallahu anhu. They helped clean up the temple. But then we have 10th century and 9th century Jewish sources, non-Muslim Jewish sources, where they say that the Muslims allowed us back in the land. And they even refer to the temple as a legitimate temple built by the Ishmaelites. So in the first exile, Cyrus does what the Davidic Messiah is supposed to do, and then in the second exile, Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, does what the Davidic Messiah is supposed to do. So Allah is rebuking them, yet as Jesus says, they have eyes but they cannot see, and they have ears but they do not listen.
Yeah, no, mashallah, that's beautiful. Another propaganda is obviously people know is between Isaac and Ishmael in the Bible, you know.
Well, but the thing to say, Brother Hashim, is propaganda is as old as human beings have been on the earth.
Yeah, that's right.
So don't think it only arrived with the social media generation, or it's sort of like a recent thing. It's
No,
been
no,
happening
definitely
for
not.
centuries.
It's one of the most important tools, I think,
Go ahead,
in
Brother Zakir.
many of the adversaries. You mentioned Jacob and
He wants to come in
Esau.
with something. Sorry, Brother Zakir wants to come in with something.
Yeah, just one
Oh,
last
is
thing
it? Yeah,
regarding the propaganda, because in previous discussions that Dr. Brands had on this subject, he said things like, "No Jew ever expected a Arab prophet like Moses," and I was thinking in my mind, were those Jews expecting a God-man, a prophet
Yes,
like Moses?
absolutely right.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
which one is more of a stretch? So sometimes I
Exactly.
think, do they even ponder over what they themselves are saying?
Yeah, none of the
But-
Jews expected a Messiah to be worshipped. This
No.
is what Messianic Jews and Christians, or whatever they want to call themselves, need to realize, that you're trying to play with words and trying to manipulate the Old Testament message, just like the Pharisees did, no different. You're just playing word games here when there's explicit passages which says that there's no other God besides me. This is what God Almighty says in the Old Testament. Now, he didn't say besides us. There's no Almighty God besides us, because they love to play on the word game again with the us and the we, even though they are majestic plurals. But then when it comes to explicit statements like this, there's no God besides me, what do you say then? You don't have an answer, yeah. So you're mentioning about Jacob and Esau, how they actually set them apart as well. And guess who gets in onto the propaganda game? It's none other than Paul, when he makes a statement: Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. Now, apparently this is God speaking in the Bible. So all those Christians who say turn the other cheek, love your enemy, your own God hates. So you want to be more merciful and more holy than your own God? Well, take it up with your God then. Right, carry on, Brother Zakir. Just wanted to
I want to come into one thing here very quickly. So I think going back to an earlier point you mentioned, which is the desperation, I think, that the New Testament scholars have, is they absolutely need the Old Testament to validate their position. You see. So, I mean, why is it that between these two covers, there's the Old Testament, which is the law of the Jews, which is supposedly being wiped away, and there's a new law, the New Covenant, and the New Testament, but it's still there, sitting between the two covers. You see, if something's been removed and replaced, you don't need it anymore. It's gone. Why should I even talk about it? I've got the new one. But the very fact that it still remains within the covers is actually a testament to the fact that without the Old Testament that they reverse engineer into, the New Testament actually doesn't have any meaning. There is no foundation for it. Islam needs neither of them, needs none of this. So even this question of is Muhammad in the Bible is not a question we're asking because we need to validate Islam somehow by this. And Brother Zakir can go into it. It's simply to say that for some, I think you probably, on one of your earlier debates, I heard you say this, or you probably said it in this debate as well, which is, if such a big impact was made by an individual on the planet, as Rasulullah did, Muhammad did, then it is actually unbelievable that previous messengers from God would either have not warned us about him or have foretold about him. In either way, they would not have remained silent, which would be actually the illogical thing to expect. So, Brother Zakir, do you want to make a comment on that very quickly?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges I gave him in the opening statement of this debate. At the end of it, I basically said that if the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, is a true prophet, then of course he had to be foretold in the Bible, because at the end of the day, I got this train of thought from Sheikh Ahmed Didat's books as well, because he mentioned that the Christians boast about the Old Testament or the Bible. It tells us about everything in the future, even predicting Henry Kissinger and predicting this and predicting that. So how could it be that the biggest rival to Christianity in the world today, everybody knows it has been since the 7th century, Islam and the Muslims, So how could it be the Bible foretells every little thing, but the biggest rival to the so-called religion of God? So if Islam is false, we must be the most antichrist religion on the planet, because we're the biggest rival to Christianity. So how could it be that the Bible, Jesus or Moses, would not clearly foretell the coming of Islam? If Islam is true, the Bible has to foretell it. It's impossible that they cannot. And if we're false, the Bible has to warn. Jesus and Moses have to warn their followers that such a false prophet is coming and beware. But we find nothing. And in previous lectures and talks, I've heard these Christian apologists, including Dr. Brian, say, this text is about Muhammad. He's not foretold in the Bible except as a false prophet. So I challenged him in this debate that give us a clear warning. And what did he come out with? There's general warnings about false prophets. Well, the first point is, if there's general warnings about false prophets, then that in itself proves that prophets are going to arise in the future. We don't get warnings about general warnings about false prophets, because we're in the sense of how to recognize a false prophet or a true prophet. Why don't we? Because we know there's no more prophethood. Prophethood has ended, so we don't have to check if someone's a genuine or true prophet, but they still are being told how to check, which means a true prophet is going to arise. That's the first point. Then the second point is these general texts that they normally go to about warnings of false prophets, none of them fit the Prophet Muhammad on whom be peace, which is why I openly said to him, give us the text, because and he knew it as well, which is why he said general prophecies. Any text he would have went to from the tongue of Jesus or from the mouth of Moses, none of them would have fitted the Prophet. Now, I don't care what Philippians or Colossians or Revelations or these anonymous books have got to say. I care about what Jesus and Moses and bona fide, legit, proven prophets say. So that's why I specifically said Moses or Jesus, because that's who we were talking about mainly in the debate. Please tell me where they warned their followers and he failed to produce the goods. So that was another victory, in my opinion.
Sure. A question on this comes to my mind, which many Christians, I'm sure, will be willing to know the answers to. If Muslims think the Bible is corrupted, why are you, for example, alluding to the Bible and trying to find references of Muhammad within it? What's the position Muslims have with regards to the Bible in terms of its authenticity, the information content it has? Do we consider it wholesale fabrication, a forgery, tampered, corrupted text, or is there a different position?
The first point is on a religious level, and that the orthodox position is quite well known of Islam, basically, that whatever agrees with the Quran, we can accept as coming from truth, whether it's revelation or not. It contains remnant of truth if it agrees with the Quran. If it disagrees, then we know it's a corruption. And if it's a neutral piece of information, then we stay silent on it. It may be true, it may not be true. But when the Christians raise this objection, it doesn't make sense to me, because they themselves admit that the Bible consists of, let's go with the Protestant canon, 66 different books. And the biblical scholarship has told us that these books have used different sources. Like Luke chapter 1, Luke literally tells us he used sources. So why do they feel that if we accept one thing, we have to accept everything, when these are coming from different sources himself? Like Luke used Q, for example. Luke used material called L. Luke used Mark, etc. So why does everything have to be weighed up equally, that you have to accept everything or reject everything? And Dr. Brand brought up a similar point in the debate, but I mentioned that with his logic, then the book of Jude quotes a prophecy from the book of Enoch. So that would mean that according to the New Testament, that part that Jude quotes from the book of Enoch comes from Revelation. So that's why it's quoted there. But they don't accept the rest of Enoch. So why don't they wholesale reject all of the book of Enoch, including what Jude quoted? Why do they accept that part of the book of Enoch but reject the rest? Then Dr. Brown tried to say, Paul, they quoted from poets, etc. But we weren't talking about Jude quoting from poets. Jude is literally quoting a prophecy from the book of Enoch attributed to the Lord. So they themselves do this, but when it comes to us, for some reason, they think that we should accept all the Bible or reject all of it, when the truth is in the middle.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. So inshallah, we'll be posting the link for the Q&A. Just make sure that we are giving priority to the non-Muslims. So I see quite a few questions in the chat. Maybe you want to be keyboard warriors. If you want to come into the arena here, then you're welcome. Otherwise, you remain where you are and remain, chatting there. Because the thing is, look, if you really want to get answers, then you need to come forward. You don't need to show your face, but at least in the background, we need to verify with your camera on. So make sure your camera is on for a brief moment. Only myself and Brother Mansur and Mohammad can see you. So it's just for verification.
And more priority, actually, what I would add is if you were actually at the event and you're in the chat right now, come on, join us. Tell us, because Brother Mansur and Hashim were there. If you were there as well, tell us what you thought. We'd love to hear your views, love to hear your feedback. And obviously, if you weren't there, obviously the debate's not out yet, so obviously we can't comment on that. But you feel free to ask any general questions on this topic or other that Brother Zakir can address for you.
Yes, inshallah. So while the people are still joining in, I just want to inform you guys that because this is Ramadan, our timing is a bit different. So we will most likely be doing streams on the weekends. Today is supposed to be at Speaker's Corner, but because of the rain and also the priority of Brother Zakir Husain's debate review, we decided to stay indoors. So inshallah, we'll be taking on the questions from the people joining. So whoever has joined in the background, can you please switch on your camera briefly for verification and then switch it off, and then we'll let you on the panel. Otherwise, you can type your question in the private chat if you prefer it that way.
And we haven't shown you the video because the official video is not published yet.
Yes.
As soon as the video is published, of course, we are planning to do the part
Brother
2.
Abu Muhammad, only non-Muslims at present, so please join in later. Thank you. Sorry, carry on, Mansur. Yeah.
Now, as I was saying, as soon as the debate is published, inshallah, so we will arrange another stream this week in which we will go through the debate, all of it, inshallah, as we normally do as in a reaction video, go through all the points, the counterpoints, and illustrate to you the importance of what really happened. This is a historical moment. People probably don't realize because only a few people that were there, only a few Muslims, and the rest of the audience, of course, were Christians who were there. They're mesmerized by showmanship and charismatic speaker of their own, and not being able to perhaps understand the substance that has been presented. So as we, inshallah, go through and we demonstrate to you the arguments, this will be something that you have to take for the days and years to come, because it is a new chapter in Muslim-Christian engagement on this very topic, inshallah ta'ala.
So I can see that the back is filling up, but a quick question. Lars Eric, you're there. If you want to switch, come on, you need to switch on your camera. Otherwise, we will kick you out of the studio. You cannot join without showing us the camera. Thank you. Everybody else is. Thank you.
All right, so we got Rob from Sentinel Apologetics. Hi, how are you doing, Rob?
Hey, guys.
Yeah, how are you, Rob?
What time is it for you, Rob?
Well, not too late this time. It's only 9:40 p.m.
9:40 in the evening. 9:40 in the evening. Okay.
Yes,
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Where is he joining from? I don't know.
He joins from down under.
Perth, Australia.
Oh, is it okay?
Yeah,
from Australia.
Yeah, he joined us last time. So, Rob, stay on topic, please. What's on your mind?
Sure. Yeah, I'm just wondering about Zakir's, his argument on, say, Mohammad in Songs 516. Like, does he still hold to that argument after Brown's response to it?
Yes, I do, because Dr. Brown had no response to it. What he said, I addressed in the debate, and whatever I didn't address in the debate regarding Song of Songs, because there was limited time, I've already addressed in my debate with Dr. James White, because it was nothing new. If anything, this has reinforced my belief that Song of Solomon is speaking about Prophet Muhammad on whom be peace in chapter from I believe chapter 5 verse number 10 to chapter 6 verse number 3. So no, my position hasn't changed. It's been reinforced, actually. So I don't believe Dr. Brown brought anything to refute that. I showed how it alludes to the time of exile. It speaks about his mission. His physical description is there. It tells you he will be a chief standard bearer for our army of 10,000. And his name is there in the text, and I connected it to Haggai 2. I connected it to Psalm 84 by his location. So there was no refutation there.
Do I have permission to share my screen briefly?
I think.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a screenshot I've taken.
Did you get that, Rob? Are you frozen?
Oh. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hashim is saying that I'm frozen.
No, it's okay. Maybe your and Hashim, but it looks
okay.
Screen.
Yeah, Rob, I think your internet is intermittent.
Okay. Can you see this, Zakir? Is this clear to you? Like, is the writing clear?
Can you zoom in the place where you want to?
I'll try to zoom in some more.
So
this is
which
from
verse are you pointing
this
to?
is from the Anchor Yale commentary. This is a critical
You can
commentary.
highlight it if you want.
Oh no, this is a screenshot because this is directly from the commentary text.
I see. Okay.
To highlight specifically the argument. So what I want to show here is, because Brown is a Semiticist, his dissertation was on the Semitic vocabularies of how Hebrew derives from the parent language Ugaritic. Now you can see here the consonants, the Ugaritic consonants. There's your MHMD, which is used in cuneiform to discuss about the choiceness of things, specifically the choice cedars of the forest and so on. And then you have a parallelism. So this mam takim is to do with the sweetness of something. And notice there's the Ugaritic consonants MTQ. So in the song, in that verse, it's basically saying the kisses of Solomon is desirable. It's using a term that is an Ugaritic term, that there's a cognate into Hebrew, where just like how you would describe something like an idiom that would describe something as desirable or beautiful, here's an ancient term that says Solomon's mouth is like the choice cedars of Ugarit. So how could this, like, if your argument is that this is Muhammad's name, then you have to defend that Muhammad appears even in the cuneiform writings prior to the composition of the Song of Songs.
Okay, you done?
Yeah, I'm just raising this point.
Yeah,
like,
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Because I've read many commentaries on this. For one, if you even read Jewish commentaries regarding Mumtakim, his words are most sweet, and most of the Jewish scholars say that's speaking about the words of the Torah. So us Muslims know that's speaking about the words of the Quran. And then it says he is wholly desirable. Now, where the Christians keep misrepresenting is Song of Songs is filled with poetry, is it not?
It is nothing but a sexual song between Charlemagne and Solomon.
That's what you say. But the New Testament doesn't agree with you. The Church Fathers don't agree with you, and the Jews.
Where does the New Testament comment on Song of Songs?
Okay, well, I'm going to be reviewing this in a couple of days when the video's out, because I was going to use this response to Dr. Brown anyway. But I'll quote you, Dr. Brown. Obviously, off the top of my head, I ain't got my slides with me. As Dr. Brown mentions in his 5-volume works, the New Testament, agreeing with rabbinical writings, believes that the word entire Old Testament is speaking about the King Messiah. So since the entire Old Testament is speaking about the King Messiah, and Dr. Brown mentions the New Testament agrees with this, then Song of Solomon also agrees with this. That's point number one. Point number two, if you read biblical commentaries, because obviously the Christians know that the Muslims are having a field day with them, so now all of a sudden they want to change their tune and say it's not a prophecy. If you actually read the commentators, they will tell you texts such as Revelation chapter 3 verse 20 about the bridegroom knocking on the door. Christ knocking on the door, takes this imagery from Song of Songs, chapter 5, verse number 2. That's like in the Baker's commentary, they mentioned that. Then Ephesians chapter 8, Ephesians chapter 5, I believe.
Is that, by the way, is that by Grant Osborne in the Baker exegetical commentary on Revelation?
His name I can't tell you off the top of my head now. I've got it there, but I'm not going to go towards it, look for it. Anyway, it's the Baker commentary, and that the book that we're working on is going to have all these sources anyway. That's the second point. Ephesians chapter 5, it speaks about how people should love each other the way Christ loves his followers or the church. I haven't got it with me right now because this is supposed to be a casual chat. The commentators say that this is based on the imagery found in the Old Testament of God's love for Israel, with Song of Solomon being the closest to resemble this. So the New Testament does allude to that. And that's why the church fathers who Christians of today want to throw under the bus, that's why they built upon this. So it is a prophecy about Christ according to the New Testament and biblical scholars that you guys want to throw away now because the Muslims have proven otherwise. But that's fine. That's the first point. So Mumtakim I've dealt with, as the Jewish commentators mentioned. Now, where we're being misrepresented is, I've been clear in my debate with James White and clear in my debate with Dr. Brown that we are not saying that grammatically is saying that he is Muhammad, like you should translate it in that way. What we're saying is, because you guys are throwing out the Jewish methodologies, is his name is foreshadowed in the text. Foreshadowed in the text. Now, what I mentioned in my opening statement of this debate is that the way the Jews and Christians have always taken Song of Songs, as Ellen F. Davis says, is one of the most biblical of books, even though you want to resort it to a love story anyway, is the most, every text of Song of Songs is alluding to some other part of the Bible. Like, for example, like you get Christians now saying, oh, it's got sexual imagery in it. One of the most explicit sexual imagery I think is found in Song of Songs chapter 5 towards the starting of the chapter is actually quoting a passage from Jeremiah about God speaking about Israel with that same wording. So what it is Song of Songs is alluding to different biblical texts. This is why I said Isaiah chapter Song of Songs chapter 5 verse number 7 is alluding to the exile, and 10 is alluding to how does he's white Deuteronomy 33, and 11 is, I believe, this is off the top of my head, is alluding to Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7, and the whole description itself is alluding to Daniel chapter 2. So the way it's being described is alluding to different biblical prophecies. And then I mentioned that verse 16 is alluding to Haggai chapter 2.
Verse 11 you mean? Song of Songs 5:11.
Yeah, 5:11 off the top of my head. Yeah, you is alluding to Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, and Song of Songs chapter 5 verse number 16 is alluding to Haggai chapter 2, where his name is found, by the way. And so by connecting it to Haggai chapter 2, we know the name is foreshadowed in the text, but also we know there's a play on his name in the text where it's telling you that he fulfills the meaning of his name. And his name in Hebrew is means desirable. So all this description about how beautiful he is from top to bottom, he fulfills that, and that's what his name means in Hebrew. And when you take it to his Arabic meaning, he is wholly praiseworthy, and in Song of Songs he's getting nothing but praise. So the poet is telling you he fulfills his name in this text. So it's being used poetically, and we know his name is foreshadowed in there, connecting it to Haggai chapter 2. And the way Jews would have seen this when they saw Prophet Muhammad, as Abdullah bin Salam radiallahu anhu said, I knew his name and his description, and it's clear he was alluding to Song of Songs. So that's how we're using it. So what you guys are doing now, with all due respect, is you're throwing away the Jewish methods, you're throwing away the New Testament methods, you're throwing away the church father methods, and you want to get into grammatically this, grammatically that, but you don't even follow that when it comes to prophecies of Christ. So as far as I'm concerned, there was no refutation to Song of Songs, and Dr. Brown actually contradicted a lot of what he himself believes and writes in his own books. So to me, that just reinforces Song of Songs, and there's no refutation. And we've just got started on Song of Songs, and the Christians ain't going to have a hole to hide in once our book is out, with all due respect, on this topic.
Okay, so I'll go from the last statement you said back to Revelation. Revelation 3.
Okay,
I knock
this
on the
ain't a
door.
debate, by the way. You've asked your question,
I,
and we're going to allow other people to answer. If you want to debate
no,
the
I would
subject,
love to respond to that. That's not fair for
yeah,
you to just rattle off with that, and I don't get to have a response.
but this is not a debate.
This was meant. This is not a debate. This is a discussion. I thought this is. I'm not intimidated by the arguments you're raising here. I would like to respond
No,
to
I'm
the
not
statements you
intimidated
made.
as well, but this is supposed to be a Q&A, not a back and forth.
Okay, then I'll ask.
Why don't
okay,
you come on the next...
I'll pass it as a question then. I'll pass it as a question.
I'll pass it as a question, and then let other people ask as well.
So you mentioned, for example, I'll choose one. You mentioned verse 11, which reads,
Yeah.
His head is pure gold, his hair is wavy black like a raven. Okay.
Yeah.
Question. So Uthmakil, for example, he specializes in iconography in the ancient Near East. He's the one that also showcases the Ugaritic cognate borrowings in verse 16. He then notices that, yes, he does reference Daniel 2, but then he at the same time is not saying that there's some sort of borrowing. So my question to you is, why does ancient Near Eastern scholars like Uthmakil, because they themselves are not Christian, why does he then correlate this with the Baal imagery, with the Baal cycle and Baal idols that showcase golden heads, bronze torsos, iron legs, the same sort of imagery you see in the Babylonian dream of Nebuchadnezzar, because Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold and honor gold. So this is right in line with the ancient Near Eastern context. Hence, verse 16, that the Hebrew term that you think is Muhammad's name is right in line with an Ugaritic cognate.
It is.
So why is that the case?
I don't think it. Okay, I'm going to respond. Who you mentioned, I haven't read his works, but I'll mention other scholars. And this is off the top of my head, so if I say the wrong name, then don't try to make some reaction video that you misquoted someone. But the substance is correct.
I don't do that sort of thing, no.
Okay, that's fine, because I don't know who you are anyway. But anyway, so you mentioned yourself that even he connected it to Daniel chapter 2, the head of gold with Nebuchadnezzar, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, so that confirms what I've been saying as well, that Song of Solomon connects to different verses. So I believe it's Ellen F. Davies who mentions that first off, the description of this person from 5:10 to verse 16 is a parody of the statue that Nebuchadnezzar sees. And then there's a comparison between the two, whereas Nebuchadnezzar starts off with a head of gold. As you go down, it's getting more and more flawed.
Someone's clicking really bad. I think it could be Hazem. I don't know. Anyway, keep going. Sorry.
Okay, so the head of gold of Nebuchadnezzar, it gets more and more flawed as you go down, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas the person being described now,
the metals, it goes from precious metals to nothing, clay.
I know. Whereas this person being described, he starts off with a head of gold and he's perfect the whole way down, correct?
You mean Solomon?
Yes, in Song of Solomon, this person being described, he starts off with the same head of gold as Nebuchadnezzar, whereas Nebuchadnezzar's dream, it gets more and more flawed because it's the beastly kingdoms, as mentioned in Daniel chapter 7. This person being described starts off with the head of gold and he carries on perfect in every way from head to toe, correct?
I mean, the text doesn't say that he's described in a perfect way. All Uthmakil's point is that this is right in line with ancient Near Eastern iconographic imagery and idol. Because idols are given heads of gold and they're dressed up like this.
Okay, I'm asking you a simple question. The person being described in Song of Songs chapter 5 verse number 10, who starts off with the head of gold, which you admit even the scholar you mentioned recalls to Nebuchadnezzar's head of gold, correct?
He's not saying he's borrowing from Daniel 2. He's correlating the Daniel 2 imagery in its Babylonian context as being natural to the ancient Near Eastern idol shape. Because all idols start with a head of gold. It's just
whether he's saying
it's right in the milieu of the context.
Okay, whether he's saying that or not, the fact is it's connected to the head of gold in Daniel 2, correct?
It's not connected.
Okay, the head of gold.
Daniel 2 is right. Daniel 2 is in isolation. Daniel is a 6th century BC author.
All right.
Song of Songs is not at all. Song of Songs is prior to Daniel 2.
Okay, so if you're not basically taking Song of Songs as scripture, as prophecy, or as a religious text, then are you just taking in a purely secular way?
It matches the ancient Near Eastern practice of first starting with the head of gold.
So
and
what I'm
bringing it
telling
down.
you, in light of other scholars, what they're saying is Daniel chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar's dream is a head of gold, and it gets flawed the more it goes down. Correct? You agreed to that a minute ago.
Wait, maybe what do you mean by flawed? What is flawed?
The statue starts getting more and more
You mean
flawed.
flawed?
Yeah.
Like it becomes flawed.
More problems, more imperfections.
Right,
Starts off as gold, and then it starts getting all
so is that happening? Is that also happening in chapter 5?
So I'm telling you, in chapter 5, what they're saying is the description that starts off with the head of gold is a parody of the statue in Daniel chapter 2, but the difference is that this person is perfect from head to toe. Every description given to this person, from his hair, from his skin color, to the way his stomach is, I believe like ivory, etc. This person is perfect. Now his words are most sweet, and then it ends with he is wholly desirable. In other words, all of him is desirable. So this person is perfect, and he fits his description. So that's the connection to Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7.
But how is it a connection when there's a difference? One is perfect and one's not.
Yeah. This is where the connection is. Whereas Daniel chapter 2 is about the 4 kingdoms, and as the kingdoms progress through time, they're getting more and more degenerate. This person is the son of man of the kingdom of the righteous people of God in Daniel chapter 7, who are the kingdom that is perfect, the earthly kingdom, compared to those beastly kingdoms in Daniel chapter 7. So this is an allusion to Daniel chapter 2, that the kingdom of God are the Muslims, the 5th kingdom that came, that defeated the Romans and the Persians, who inherited all the previous kingdoms.
Is Muhammad the rock? So is Muhammad the rock that smites the statue?
The Muslims are the rock that smite the statue, because without no human means, as even non-Muslim scholars have said, the Arabs came out and they demolished 2 empires that are beastly kingdoms, according to the book of Daniel, and within a century reached parts of France to the border of China. That's the first point.
Okay.
And Prophet
so
Muhammad,
is Muhammad the cloud rider?
No. Oh, okay. You want to get into the whole cloud rider thing? The first thing
because
is
the Baal cycle in Daniel 7 would not match
listen,
Muhammad.
I know your material. You don't have to tell me. Yeah. The first point is that even though the cloud imagery is used in Daniel chapter 7, it doesn't actually say he rode the cloud. So let's get that first point. That's Unitarian.
It does say that.
Point, but it doesn't actually use the word riding the cloud, as Unitarian Christians
no, it does.
mentioned.
What does the Baal cycle say?
I don't care about what the Baal cycle says. Daniel chapter 7 doesn't use the word riding the cloud.
The Daniel 7 is right in line with the Baal cycle. You have El, the Ancient of Days.
Rider. It doesn't
and then
use
you
the
have
word rider.
Baal,
Moreover,
who's the charioteer of the clouds.
First point is, he doesn't use the word riding the clouds. That's the first point. The second point is, Daniel chapter 7 itself tells you then who this is. It's the saints of the Most High. So that refutes all this deity nonsense that Trinitarians come out with. And so,
which verse says that? It doesn't say that the saints of the Most High is the Son of Man.
Look, I haven't got Daniel chapter 7 with me, but they're identified as the saintly kingdom of the Most High. Everybody knows this except for Trinitarians.
No,
that they're the one
not
identified
even
as the Son of Man.
Quote me a critical scholar that says that.
The Son of Man is it says
it's actually correct? Daniel 7:18. It says, but the saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever.
The word
and is used forever and ever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as you say,
I think hold on. I think Rob, you have asked several questions which Zakir has already answered. It's like, I don't know. This is not, like I said, Zakir also said, not a back and forth. So let's stick to one question at a time. We have to give other people a chance as well.
Well, notice he's jumping to all these other topics.
Maybe you want to join in next time?
But you're asking me questions, so I have to jump on them.
No, I stuck with one question, 5:16.
Of which,
and now he's jumped to Daniel 2 and then declaring that Muhammad is the rock, which is just nonsense. No biblical scholar would say.
Isn't this Rob?
No biblical scholar would say that Muhammad is the rock of Daniel 2.
Are you a Christian? Are you a Christian?
Yes, I'm a Christian.
Okay, most Jewish scholars would not say that Jesus fulfills half the text you claim.
No Jewish scholar would say Daniel 2 is describing Muhammad. This is a foreign interpretation of Daniel. I mean, for goodness sake,
Okay,
don't do that
okay,
to
so-
Daniel scholarship.
Okay, so if the Jews that reject Jesus, you accept that?
Well, it
When they
depends on
say-
what Jews you're talking about. If you're
No,
talking
no,
about
no.
rabbinic Judaism, that is not Second Temple Judaism. Their pesha is totally different.
Look, I'm asking you a simple question. The Jews that claim that Jesus is not foretold in the Old Testament except as a false prophet, do you accept what they
Yeah,
have to
but
say?
Jews, that's such an ambiguous
Listen,
term.
don't
What do you mean
jump
by
around
the
now.
Jews?
You accuse me of
Are you
jumping
talking about
around.
Are you talking about Second Temple Jews?
Which Jews are you talking about?
Second Temple Jews.
The mainstream Judaism, Rob,
So
it's
how do you
simple.
know Second
There
Temple
is no
mainstream
such thing
Judaism
as there's
doesn't.
no such thing as mainstream Judaism.
Oh, really? So,
Yes.
are you saying the Jews accept Jesus as a Messiah?
No, your Second Temple Jews accept Jesus as the Messiah.
Not
You know,
all of
this
them.
guy's
The
playing
mass-
games. I really don't have
yeah,
time with
he
this
cornered
guys.
himself there with his double
Everyone
standard.
knows the Jews reject Jesus Christ as the Messiah. Okay.
John chapter 1, what does it say?
Second
he came
temple,
to
first
his
temple,
own and
I
they
mean, what's
received him
this?
not. He came to his own and they received him not.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah,
well
so
known
just
fact.
get
I
it.
mean, if you want to play word games, go elsewhere, not on this panel. So, Mark in the background, or as you came with your earlier name, Cheney Lee, you need to show your video. You need to switch on your camera for verification, or just type your question in the private chat. Okay, look, they all run away when we ask them to do
I
that.
just want to
Why?
have a quick review of this. I mean, he thinks that he's going to come here to debate you rather than ask you questions. And as you
Yeah.
demonstrated by the intertext and the intertextuality, the context around the whole of the textual source of the Old Testament, he's now accusing you of why are you bringing those intertext, why are you bringing the subtext, why are you bringing the context, why are you actually bringing other texts. That's how things should be understood, rather than just picking a verse and you cherry pick it and that's it. So your methodology, which is the scholarly methodology, is now being accused of using it properly.
And the thing about it is, I mentioned right from the get-go, that Song of Songs, as scholars mention, is the most biblical of books because nearly every verse is alluding to other biblical passages. And that's how the ancient Jews and the church fathers took it. So when I'm doing the exact same thing now, we're saying you jump into there and you jump into there. Whereas the church fathers will say, this verse is speaking about what Jesus did in Matthew 1 and what Jesus did in Matthew 2. But when I do the same thing, I'm jumping all over the place.
Yeah,
He wants to put me in a straitjacket, basically.
It's a shame, though. And then he was asking for where is the text in Daniel 7 about the saints of the Most High, and it was in verse 18, which sort of Hashim pointed to.
And the thing with that is, because today's supposed to be casual, I ain't got my sources or my Bible with me that they want me to check all
You're
these
not
things
meant
out.
to have a debate here. You're just answering questions, and even
Yeah,
though
it's screen time. That's what he wants actually with his.
They should.
He wants
they
to
should
push his
know-
channel.
The Christians should know after my debates, I empty myself out of knowledge like Jesus in Philippians 2.
Yeah, no problem.
and
So, Lars,
also
if you're still waiting in the background, we need to see your
just
camera
before
on
this is a
for
good
verification,
point,
or
so Hashim
just type your
mentioning.
question. Yeah.
We don't want anyone to plug their channel. If you just want to come with your name only, right?
Yeah.
We don't want people to just come here, and take this platform to have some kind of free publicity of your own channel. You can come with your name, and if your name is like a cartoon character, we don't mind. Like many people go ahead, not really talking about their names.
Yeah.
So Yusuf, the layman.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Alaikum assalam.
My question is, we're all.
Where are you joining from, Yusuf? We can barely hear you. You need to speak
Oh.
up.
I'm from Morocco. So my question is.
You need to speak up. We can barely hear you.
Oh, sorry. My question is, the thing is, were all prophets
Can
Israelites?
you guys hear him?
before-
Because I can barely hear him.
Were all prophets before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam Israelites?
Who wants to answer that?
You.
No, not all prophets were Israelites. There were Gentile prophets. Even the Jews, Maimonides acknowledges this because Maimonides was responding to Muslims, and he said that they accuse us of not accepting any non-Israelite prophets, but we accept prophets such as he gives the example of Obadiah, who's a prophet mentioned in the Bible. The book of Obadiah, they admit that he was a Gentile. So even the Jews recognize Gentile prophets. But why they don't recognize the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, is because they'll recognize Gentile prophets, but they won't accept someone who brings Sharia that abrogates anything of the Torah. So they won't accept him. Or if they do accept him as a true prophet, they'll say, and there were Jewish sects that believe this, that he's a true prophet, but for the Arabs, not for the Jews. So even if they are true prophets, they're not for us because we follow the Sharia of Moses. So yes, they do. They are non-Israelite prophets.
Yeah, that was my train of thought. I was thinking like, can we suppose that the Prophet ﷺ was prophesied in the original Torah, but the the Jews like altered this original Torah to remove him from the original scripture, like like he was removed from the Injil.
Well, I'll give you an example of how even some of the distortion is there right now in the Bible, which leads to false interpretations. We'll deal with this mainly when we review the video, but I issued another question to Dr. Brown in my opening statement that I want him to explain how Deuteronomy chapter 18, where it speaks about a prophet like Moses, is speaking about a line of prophets. Because you'll notice a lot of Jews and Christians will tell you today that it's not speaking about an individual prophet. It's speaking about multiple prophets that will come to the children of Israel. Now, where have they got this interpretation from? The prophecy itself is making it clear, speaking about a singular prophet. But what they will tell you is because of the context. It's found in chapter 18 where the Israelites are being told they're about to go into the land and they shouldn't listen to sorcerers. Instead, God will raise up multiple prophets for you. So you don't listen to all these sorcerers like the pagan nations around you. Instead, God will keep raising up multiple prophets for you. Now, why is this a distortion? Because the prophecy itself is Allah knew the distortions that the people of the book were going to do. Why do you think in this prophecy, God goes on to tell you the context for when the prophecy was revealed in verse 16 and 17. This is a unique situation where the prophecy is given and the context is embedded within the prophecy, where God goes on to say that this is what you desired of the Lord on the day of Horeb, when you said, let us not hear the voice of God again, lest we die. What they have said is good, so I will raise up another prophet like Moses. And it goes on to quote. Now, why is that there? Because within the text itself is telling you that the real context for it, for this prophecy, is not Deuteronomy 18 connected to the pagan sorcerers, where it's placed right now in the Bibles of today. The real context is Exodus chapter 20, on the day where Moses received the Torah and they could hear the voice of God publicly. And then they said in Exodus chapter 20, let us not hear the voice of God anymore. That's where this prophecy was given. And Deuteronomy 18 verse 16 confirms this. So when you interpret this prophecy, you should be interpreting it in light of Exodus chapter 20, not in light of Deuteronomy 18 in regards to the sorcerers. And interestingly, in the Qumran scrolls in 4Q 158 and in the Samaritan Torah and Acts chapter 7 confirm that Exodus 20 was the original context for this prophecy. So once it goes back into its original context, there's nothing to show that this is speaking about a line of prophets like the Jews or Christians claim. It's clear it's speaking about a singular prophet. So even now in the Bible of today, we can see they're getting their false interpretations due to editors of the Bible taking prophecies out of their context and placing it in places to give a false interpretation. That's why most Jews and Christians are victims of what the editors and redactors of the Bible did.
Jazakallah khairan for this very detailed answer. I hope, Brother Yusuf, you can take note of this. Probably watch, if you haven't taken notes, watch it again. All the references he's quoted. This is, I hope it's not an information overload, but it's a detailed response to understand the subject matter, inshallah. So thank you for coming.
And thank you very much. I have a last question, pretty quick.
Okay, if it's quick enough, inshallah.
Brother Zakir, you talked about Deuteronomy 18:18. I remember something like one argument that said that it was talking about Joshua. Can you refute that, please?
Yes, I can refute that. The first point is that where it's placed right now in Deuteronomy chapter 18, what does God say? God says, I will raise up a prophet, correct?
Yes.
So it's something God's going to do.
Yes.
But Joshua was already raised up as a prophet in the book of Numbers, which I believe, off the top of my head, was either Numbers chapter 27 or I'd have to check. But he was already anointed. So the first point is, if he's the prophet like Moses, why is God still saying, I will raise up? Then the second point is, you see, the Jews say that there's no extra words in the Torah. Every little detail has a meaning. So God doesn't just say, I'm going to raise up a prophet, but he uses the words like Moses. Why? Because that means that this prophet's going to be unique the way Moses was. Because up until that point, Israel had already had about 72 prophets. Because in the book of Numbers, we know that Aaron is a prophet. So that's one prophet already raised up. Miriam, Moses' sister, is a prophetess according to the Torah. And then there were 70 other people that were given the gift of prophecy in the Bible. And then there was Joshua. But yet, God doesn't just say, I will raise up prophets. Generally, he says like Moses, meaning not like these other prophets who are more general, but someone who will be unique like Moses. So Joshua wasn't unique like Moses in that sense. And the third point is Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse number 9 and 10, where it says, there has not arisen again in Israel a prophet like unto Moses. Now, if Moses wrote that, that rules out all the prophets after him. And if the other opinion that you get from many Jews and rabbis that Joshua wrote that, then Joshua denied that he was like Moses. And or the other opinion that it was written centuries later, if that opinion is correct, then that person is denying that everybody before he wrote it was like Moses. So either way, it's impossible for Joshua to be the prophet like Moses.
Okay.
Okay.
Brother.
Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you for coming. Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Okay, we got, I think, last guest now. So we will be closing shortly because it's Ramadan. Just want to make sure that we just, do it for a brief time.
Yeah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Yeah. So basically, I have two questions. So first question is, what's your take on Genesis 49 verse 10, which says about this scepter that shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet until the Shiloh comes, blah blah blah. And the last question I have is,
let's do one at a time. So
okay, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Where are you joining from, brother?
I'm from Singapore.
Okay, welcome, brother. Okay, yeah. Zakir?
Yes, I come on.
Okay, Genesis chapter 49, verse number 10 about the Shiloh is definitely about the prophet on whom be peace. Jewish and Christian commentators, a lot of them understand Shiloh as meaning him to who it belongs. So in other words, the prophecy of attribute to Jacob is saying regarding Judah that you shall have this ruler staff, the scepter, until he to whom it belongs comes, which fits the narrative of what we know that amongst Bani Israel, the kingdom, the kinship was within the tribe of Judah, from what we know, David and Solomon, etc. And they will have that right until he to whom it belongs comes. And the fact that it says until implies that he to whom it belongs comes is not from the tribe of Judah. So this is where the Christians go wrong. They claim that Jesus is from Judah. So if it's up until him, then when he gets the staff, the scepters, the staff is still within Judah because he's from Judah, but the text is making it clear that it's only going to be until he comes, implying that when he comes, the staff will leave Judah. So it has to be a non-Israelite, because no other Israelite tribe had the right to rulership and the scepter, only Judah did. And this person has to be somebody that's not from Israel then, because when he comes, that right will be taken away. And this is why, after the time of Dawood alayhi Islam, the Israelites never truly had the right to the land of Palestine. Even though they were there, it was ruled by other nations. And then when the Prophet Muhammad, on whom be peace, arose, the Muslims took over the land, and we have been the custodians ever since, putting aside this end time scenario of the Zionist state, and that which is a discussion for another day. But this is why Malachi chapter 3 says that he shall come to his temple. Why is it referred to his temple, meaning the temple of the Prophet, peace be upon him? Because he led the prayers in Masjid al-Aqsa on the night he went there with all the prophets behind him, because he is the leader of mankind, he is the leader of the prophets, and it's referred to as his temple because he is the custodian of Masjid al-Aqsa, and by extension that makes us the true legitimate custodians of Masjid al-Aqsa today, and not the Jews who reject the Prophet on whom be peace. So Shiloh is definitely the Prophet Muhammad on whom be peace.
Yeah, Jazakumullah khairan. Basically, that was what I thought as well, because I've been reading some commentaries from the Christians, from the Christian brethren, that says that I was referring to Jesus Christ because it's the scepter shall not differ from Judah until he comes, the Shiloh comes. So they say, oh, this must be a reference to Jesus. But now it's clearer. Yeah, so thank you so much. So my second question is with regards to Isaiah 29:12, which states that, this book, the book will be given to the one who is unlettered, and he'll be, I think somewhere along that line that, I can't read. So what are your thoughts on that? Hello?
Isaiah 29:12. I'm going to be honest. I personally haven't studied that chapter in detail, because when the Muslims say that, it's speaking about what happened with the Prophet Muhammad on whom be peace in the cave when the first revelation came regarding Iqra. There's another chapter, Isaiah chapter 40, which I brought up in my debate, which has the same exact thing: proclaim. And somebody replies, "What shall I proclaim?" And that's the one I've studied. That's part of my research. Isaiah chapter 29:12, although I've heard many Muslims use that one, I haven't personally ever studied that chapter properly, so I won't be able to comment on that one.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for your answer.
No problem.
All right, so
All right.
I shall
Thanks a
read.
lot, brother. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum salam
Welcome,
wa
salam.
rahmatullahi. So yeah, that was our last guest. Maybe we can close now. So any thoughts, Brother Mansur?
Yeah, no, I thought the previous discussion Rob was having, like, he turned it up like another debate. I mean, this is what
exactly. Yeah.
people think when they come in a question and answer session, Q&A. They can instigate a whole debate back and forth. I mean, if you really want to debate, then arrange one. Q&A, leave it to Q&A as it is. Because when I was there in that debate between Zakir and Dr. Brown, I had one question and I knew he didn't answer my question adequately. I would have just corrected him and put my response, but that's not the format of how Q&As are. If that was the case, then I would have had a full-blown debate with him. But you just have to understand that this is his Q&A, is not another debate opportunity. So if Rob ever wants to come in our stream in a Q&A session, he needs to really appreciate that. As regards to the point that you mentioned as well, one of the things that comes to my mind, people often go further away to dilute the subject because they realize the subject on its own, it's going to be a problem. Like he was alluding to Ugaritic text, maybe some other cognates and so on, because the Hebrew text is going to be problematic for him. They have to find some parallels. Either it supports the text or it gives you a different meaning. I mean, I often find this with many people when they do that. They, instead of dealing with the Quran as it comes in the Arabic language, they say, no, look, let's go back to the Nabateans, let's go back to the other texts and so on, because it may mean something different. Why don't you deal with what the Quran is saying in its Arabic of the Quran as it's explaining the meaning? So your examples of all this text that you're reading into, some people will find difficulty in accepting it because now it goes against their understanding or against what the obvious implication of the text is saying. They have to now resort to some other mechanisms, some other means in which they will say, actually, it doesn't mean that because in Chinese it means this, so it must be true. Just like the example, in the debate itself, he was saying, well, it can be referred to myself, my name, Michael, Mikhail is mentioned, or it could refer to, some Confucius or whoever. This is the utter desperation, not really dealing with the topic. The example, I mean, I don't want to give too much away, but we will deal with that, inshallah, in the actual debate footage when the MDI publishes debate, and we'll have another debate review session, inshallah, with Ustad Zakir, in which we will go through point by point every single arguments that Zakir in an opening presentation, the rebuttals, the counter rebuttals, and so on and so forth. So those of you who have come late and joining us, we will have a proper debate review of the footage when it's published by MDI officially, inshallah, planned for
published today or maybe latest tomorrow, but we might do a review early next week or mid next week, inshallah.
Inshallah, yes. And Brother Zakir, any last words before we close the stream?
I'd just like to say I appreciate this opportunity of being on your channel and that, and may Allah reward you too, and may Allah increase His blessings upon you lot. You lot are doing good work, especially Speaker's Corner. It's helped a lot of Muslims around the world, and just keep up the good work.
Barakallah feek. Jazakallah khair. So yeah, inshallah, as Brother Mansur pointed out, once the footage of the debate, the official footage is released by MDI, we will be having the second part of this live stream, and it'll be a full review of the debate, inshallah. And yeah, keep an eye out on our community section on the DawahWise YouTube channel. We'll be posting it. So you can be you should have already subscribed and had the the notification with the bell icon clicked on, so you'll get the notifications in time as well, inshallah. Please do keep us in your du'as during this blessed month of Ramadan, and do share, do subscribe to DawahWise, and inshallah it'll benefit you, and you can also benefit from taking part in the reward that's associated with it, because Allah is Al-Ghani and He does not hold back when He rewards someone and who is helping them. Also, for example, if you give charity, or if you fast and you're helping somebody else to break their fast, yes, this is all in which you will reap the benefit, because not only the person fasting will get the reward, but also you will get the reward for the person fasting, because you help them to break their fast. So this is something which Allah is merciful, and His bounty is limitless, that we cannot even comprehend. So in this month, try to make every effort to not only increase in the amount of charity that you give, but also increase in the goodness that you would not normally do, like not only doing the fard salat, not only doing the tarawih, reading the Quran, but also doing the nafil prayers and so on. Try to reap as much reward as possible in this blessed month. So jazakallah khair. With that, we conclude this session. Until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. نحمد ونصلي.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت وأستغفرك وأتوب